Good evening and welcome to the January 22nd, 2025 meeting of the City of Summit Zoning Board of Adjustment. My name is Scott Loigitz and I am the Chair of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. In accordance with New Jersey Statute 10:4-10, adequate notice of this special meeting has been provided to a newspaper of record. It's been posted here in City Hall. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. For the benefit of the interested public, this meeting is being live streamed on the city's YouTube channel and also broadcast on Summit's government channel, which is Comcast Channel 34 and Verizon Channel 30. A transcript of this meeting is also being taken using video and audio, so we need all speakers to utilize one of the microphones in the room. Please note that the fire exits are to my right, your left, and the back of the room where you entered. The city has a listening system to assist the hearing impaired. If anyone needs hearing assistance, please obtain the system at the dais and return it thereafter. Ms. Sulios, please call the roll of the members.
Sure. Chairman Loikitz,
Here.
Vice Chair Zahn,
Here.
Mr. Steiner,
Here.
Mr. Yuko,
Here.
Mr. Nelson,
Here.
Mr. Curran is excused, Mr. Malay is excused, Ms. Chifo,
Here.
Mr. Feskins,
Here.
Mr. Chanchuli,
Here.
Mr. Nearing.
Here.
You have a quorum. You may proceed.
Thanks, Stephanie. Andy Ball is our zoning board's attorney, but Andy's not here tonight. So filling in for him will be Zach Sisinski. Sorry, Zach. I do that every time. Our board attorney advises board members on matters of law and is the key interface with the applicant's attorney. Mr. Ball typically does not vote on applications. Stephanie Sulios is a city employee and is the zoning board secretary. Ms. Sulios works with applicants on preparing their applications, planning our agendas, and keeping our meeting minutes. Ms. Sulios also does not vote on these applications. Also present are our experts who are hired annually by the board to provide input. Tonight we have Marie Raffay from Collier's Engineering. Also present is Steve Lyden from Burgess, sitting in for Ed Snikes, and acting as board planner. These experts are seated at the table to the right of the board, the public's left. They also do not vote on the applications. Our board consists of 7 regular members and up to 4 alternates. All members can participate in the hearings tonight, but only a maximum of 7 can vote. Most applications require a simple majority to be approved. Before we enter executive session to vote on the application, you will be advised of how many votes are required. Each case will begin with the applicants or their attorney giving an overview of the application, the application process to date, and the variances that are required. We then hear from any additional expert witnesses that the applicant may have to help explain the application and why the variances are needed. The board experts, followed by the board members, may ask questions of the applicant, their attorney, and expert witnesses. I also want to note, due to recent cases running excessively long, we strongly encourage applicants and their experts to give brief and concise testimony so we may get through as many cases as possible in a given evening. Once the board members and the board professionals have completed their questioning, the public will have an opportunity to ask questions. This is not the time to tell us of what you think about the case. That'll come later. Please be careful as to how you phrase your questions. They should not be preceded with a statement about the case, but should be a direct question to the witness. Also, before you ask your questions, please clearly state your name, spell your last name, and provide us your address. It's important that our court reporter be able to keep a clear and accurate public record. After all witnesses have been heard, members of the audience have their second opportunity to speak. That is the time when you may come up and express your opinion, positive or negative, about the application. Then the public hearing is closed and we enter into executive session. This is where the board members discuss the case and vote. You'll be able to listen to the executive session, but normally not be able to participate in that discussion. I will ask each applicant and/or their attorney, if present, to come up and give a brief synopsis of their anticipated testimony tonight, including the number of witnesses and whether or not they can finish their presentation within 30 minutes. So, to start, number one, NRK for 573 Springfield. Thanks.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It is understood that the board has graciously offered to host a special meeting for us, if that's still available for March 12th, so the applicant would very much appreciate that.
Great. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next, Roy Johnson, 12 Hillside.
And we need form,
What's that?
we need form to carry.
Oh, we do, all right. Can I get a motion to carry 573 Springfield?
So moved to March 12th.
Get a second?
Second.
Mr. Steiner?
Yes.
Chairman Loikitz?
Yes.
Mr. Yuko?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Zahn?
Yes.
Ms. Chifo?
Yes.
Mr. Feskins?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Great, thank you.
I'm sorry, are we doing with notice or without notice, just for the record?
Without.
Without notice.
Without
Yep.
notice, okay.
All right, Mr. Johnson.
Good evening, my name is Roy Johnson. I am the owner of 12 Hillside Avenue in Summit. I'm here on behalf of myself and my wife, Susan, and we are requesting relief from the zoning regulations of variance for a rear yard setback, allowing installation of an air conditioning compressor in the backyard of our home. So minor description.
Are we going right into it, or?
No, I just want to do the
Sorry.
summary
Feel
first,
free.
so, yeah.
Okay. So listen,
No
it's a
problem.
fairly modest request. Residence is a two-story Cape-style house over on Hillside Avenue in the Lincoln area district. We have to deal with a lot of non-conforming conditions in the property or on the property and in the neighborhood. Houses in our R10 zone, and the work includes the installation of an air conditioning compressor to service a fan coil unit in the ceiling of.
Mr. Johnson, do you expect your testimony to take 30 minutes or less?
Yes.
All right, excellent, thank you. All right,
Hopefully it'll take 5 minutes.
well, we will get back to you in just a minute. Thank you,
Okay.
sir. All right, and for our last case of the evening, do I have a representative for Oak Knoll?
Yes.
All right, come on up.
Hi, Hillary Ulls from Dempsey and Sheehan, representing Oak Knoll School of the Holy Child. We have 6 experts, and we will not complete our application in 30 minutes.
All right, Hillary, how many experts do you think you'll get through tonight, if
As
you had to
many as
guess?
the board will sit through.
All right, we'll take that. Perfect, thank you so much, Hillary. All right, our attorney's going to swear you in, Mr. Johnson.
Please raise your right hand and state and spell your name for the record.
Roy Johnson, ROYJOHNSON.
Do you swear from the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, just for the record, I just want to note that Mr. Yuko has recused.
Thank you, Stephanie.
So as I mentioned, we're looking to install a air conditioning compressor to service a fan coil unit in the back of the home. The installation would basically be in a non-conforming condition on an already non-conforming condition at the back of the home. So we're looking for relief from the rear yard setback. Property has a lot of non-conforming issues now. It's a very small height lot. It's about 60 feet wide by about 80 feet deep, and it's occupied by a two-story expanded Cape. And we have limited locations as to where the compressor could sit without either encroaching on a setback or impacting a right-of-way or a view from the street. So after some consideration and a lot of consternation, the ideal location to place the unit is in the back of the house, pretty much out of the way of public view and impact to the neighbors. So the air conditioning unit is about 30 by 30, 30 inches by 30 inches, rests on a small pad, and like I said, after consideration, there's really no other practical location to place the unit on the property. Positive criteria, it allows the installation of a central air conditioning unit in an older home with a smaller lot. Impact of locations to neighbors within the city is negligible. The condenser is a high efficiency unit and can be surrounded by a shroud or a screen if necessary. Basically, the variance, the request for the variance could be granted without detriment to any public good or without impairing the intent of the zoning plan or existing ordinances. The proposed placement has no negative impact on the surrounding properties, the neighborhood, or the city of Summit. Rear yard property line is not bordered by a residential structure. Adjacent structure on the rear property line is a large masonry garage and serves as a multi-unit apartment complex. The review, this is probably the most logical placement for the unit. No one will see it, hear it, or be impacted by it in any way. The city agencies and councils basically reviewed the application and came back with no comment or no objections. Actually, a few of the reviewers concurred that this is probably the ideal placement for the unit. So in light of that, we petitioned relief for the zoning and approval of the variance. I don't know, I'll turn it over to the board and see if anybody has any questions or concerns or comments regarding the application.
Great. We'll check in with our experts first to see if they have any questions.
Okay.
Marie, do you have anything?
So the one thing I noticed was on the application, you said it would have a screen around it, which I don't think the planner has said that it doesn't need a screen because it's in the rear yard, but do you plan on putting a screen around it?
We could put one up again, a screen, a shroud, you know, that might not be the right description for it. I think one of the reviewers from the Environmental Commission suggested putting up some native plantings as an alternative to that, which is a great idea. We have a lot of plantings in the backyard. My wife was an avid gardener, so that's something we might consider. But again, it's out of the right of way. Nobody sees it, nobody hears it, and really it is of no impact to anybody. And it wouldn't be a structural screen of any type, it would strictly be decorative.
Right, okay, all right,
Okay.
that's all I have.
Great. Steve, do you have anything?
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few questions, if I might. You mentioned there's a garage behind your property. Do you know offhand how close that garage is to your building, to your property line, and how long that is?
So there's an easement. I don't know if the easement is still there or still recognized on the survey, but basically, I think our existing house is about 19 feet off the back property line, and then this pad is about 30 by 30, so I think the setback for the back property is 25 feet. We're already non-conforming by, I think, 6 feet or 5 feet and change, and then this just adds another couple of feet to that. I think it brings it down to 17 and change.
Yeah, actually, I was asking about the garage behind your property.
Right.
Do you know how tall that is, or how close it is to your property line?
It's 10 feet, yeah, it's basically right on the property line. It's covered with ivy, it's, you know, it's been there forever. It really is just a big monolithic structure that doesn't, you know, almost serves as a fence or a barrier for the back of our property.
So no one from that property would be able to see your air conditioning compressors?
Correct, or hear it.
Okay. And then you have a detached garage of your own, do you not?
I do, yes.
And that would also appear to block views of anybody from the north, is that correct?
That is correct. Actually, the whole backyard is fenced in, so it's really a nice tidy captive area. Like I said, it's got a lot of mature plantings, a lot of flowers, a lot of trees, a lot of foliage, fenced in. It's got the, you know, the neighbors or the multi-unit dwelling garage bordering our property on the back, and then we have a garage. Our garage is to the, if you're looking at the house, it's to the right of it, at the foot of at the end of the driveway, so.
And understanding the chairman's wish that we be quick, on both sides, both your properties are bordered by adjacent driveways, is that correct? So the dwellings are somewhat.
That is correct, actually, that is correct, yes.
Somewhat remote from your property line.
There's a setback as far as they can be, given the size of the lots, yes.
All right, I have no other questions, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Questions from the board for this witness? Seeing none, do we have questions from the public? Questions only? All right. Seeing none. Do you have a closing statement?
Not really. I hope under consideration or after consideration, this will be approved. Like I said, it's the least offensive place to put it, it's the best place to put it, and basically it makes the most sense. So from a common sense point of view, it's kind of what we're looking for.
All right, great. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Any comments from the public? Seeing none.
So will the board render a decision tonight
Yes, sir.
at the conclusion of the hearing?
I think we're going to have a very extensive debate on this, and then we'll vote. So, immediately.
Do I need to stick around? That's the
Yes,
question.
yes. You'll know in about 5 minutes or less.
Okay.
Yes, sir. How many votes do we need for this? 4. Okay, great. So we'll open it up to executive session.
Were there
Anyone
any
wanna start?
conditions?
Oh, yes, thank you, Mr.
Just the
Foreman.
standard letter?
Yeah, just the standard letter. Do we want to make a screening condition?
No.
No,
Okay,
no, I
then
don't
it's
think
just
so.
the standard letter, and it's just one condition.
Right. Who wants to begin? Jay?
I'll kick this off. First, I want to applaud Mr. Johnson. That was one of the clearest, quickest, simplest presentations for what I think is a completely reasonable, there's a hardship, it's a small lot. You're not going to be impacting your neighbors on either side between the questions you presented, the questions from our planner. This is the clearest answer. I would completely support this. Let's move it forward.
Anyone else?
There were no negatives. There are lots of positives, and I think we all ought to support it.
Great. With that, can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay. Mr. Steiner?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Vice Chair Zahn?
Yes.
Ms. Chifo?
Yes.
Mr. Feskins?
Yes.
Mr. Chanchuli?
Yes.
Chairman Loiketz?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Great. Good luck, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you very much.
You're good to go.
Have a great night, everybody.
You should know that there's a resolution that will come out in about a month. Don't move forward until you get that resolution and have the opportunity to review it and comply with all its conditions.
Understood. Thank you.
Great.
Good night.
Thank you, sir. Hillary, you're up.
Hoping mine goes just as well.
The high bar.
Okay.
All right, do this in 5 minutes.
Definitely not gonna survive that.
We'll note for the record that Mr. Yuko is rejoined.
Okay, good evening. Hillary Alls from Dempsey and Sheehan, representing the applicant Oak Knoll School of the Holy Child, Inc., regarding property located at 44 Blackburn Road and 72 Prospect Street, Block 3103, lots 2 and 3 in the R15 zone. Oak Knoll School is celebrating its centennial year as a private educational institution in the heart of Summit. The school has been a part of the Summit community and its current neighborhood since 1924, when it acquired the Larned Estate. Oak Knoll's mission is the education and growth of the whole child by providing an intellectually challenging and creative program of study that fosters excellence in every aspect of school life to meet the wants of the age. In furtherance of that mission, it is necessary for Oak Knoll to modernize its facilities to adapt to the constantly evolving nature of education, which requires a fluid development of schools themselves in order to continue to advance the education of children. The improvements proposed by Oak Knoll were specifically designed to overcome the challenges of the site and provide a modern and functional facilities that can meet the needs of today's students. There are 4 main elements to the proposed project. First are additions to Tisdale Hall, which was last renovated in 1996. Second are additions to Connolly Hall, which was built in 1956. Third is to add on-site parking in the area behind Mulcahy Hall, which is also known as 76 Prospect Street. And finally, to incorporate 72 Prospect Street back into the school's conditional use. 72 Prospect Street had previously been owned by Oak Knoll, and use for school purposes from 1952 until 1971. The applicant is seeking consolidation of the lots for 2 and 3, preliminary and final major site plan, conditional use approval and deviations from the conditional use standards regulating coverages, height and stories, minimum front and side yard setbacks, parking locations and setbacks and buffer requirements, an FAR variance, bulk variances including fence height, signage, development within regulated steep slopes, parking, dimensional and striping, and lighting, and modifications from certain prior conditions of approval. The specifics of each of these variances will be described in more detail by the applicant and its experts during the presentation. I think it is important to note at the outset that schools are classified in the municipal land use law as inherently beneficial uses, which means a school is universally considered of value to the community because it fundamentally serves the public good and promotes the general welfare. Oak Knoll is not only an inherently beneficial use, but an existing permitted conditional use. In evaluating nonconformities dealing with inherently beneficial uses, the courts have determined that the positive criteria is presumptively satisfied, focusing the discussion on the negative criteria. The negative criteria is evaluated for inherently beneficial uses by determining if there is substantial negative impacts or impairments as a direct result of the proposed improvements, and if there are conditions that can be crafted to mitigate those perceived impacts or impairments. In this case, most of the building additions are interior to the site, shielded by other buildings or sufficiently screened, and will have little to no impact on the neighbors. The school is adding parking on site, improving perimeter landscaping, improving stormwater management, and retaining the residential appearance of the house, carriage house, and driveways at 72 Prospect Street, all of which have a direct positive impact on the neighborhood. In addition, this application is also subject to the Religious Land Use and Institutional Persons Act of 2000, which provides that land use regulations shall not be imposed or implemented in a manner that impose a substantial burden on the religious exercise of a person, including an institution, unless the imposition of that burden is in furtherance of a compelling government interest and is the least restrictive means of furthering that compelling government interest. So that means that this application is benefited as a religious use protected under the Constitution, is an inherently beneficial use under the laws of the state of New Jersey, and is a permitted conditional use in the district under the ordinances of the City of Summit. The presentation for this application will begin with Jennifer Landis, head of Oak Knoll School, followed by the architect Ralph Rosenberg, civil engineer Dan Sinal, traffic engineer Craig Paragoy, landscape architect Marla Roller, and it will conclude with the applicant's planner, John Barry. So if there are no questions, I will be happy to call the first witness.
Any questions? No? All right, please call your.
Okay, Jennifer Landis.
Easy for me to be here?
Whichever's more comfortable. Our attorney will swear you in.
Pardon?
Our attorney
Raise your
will
right hand, and if you do me the favor of stating your name and spelling it for the record, please.
Jennifer Landis, Jennifer Landis.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Landis, can you please tell the board the positions of responsibility that you have had at Oak Knoll School?
Yes, I am in my 11th year at Oak Knoll. I served 6 years as the head of the upper school, which is the 7th through 12th grade there, 1 year as the associate head of school, and now I'm in my 4th year as the head of school. I also lived in Summit with my family for 5 years.
And in your current capacity as head of school, are you authorized to speak on behalf of Oak Knoll School in regard to the application pending before the board?
Yes, I am.
Okay, can you describe the objectives underlying the proposed improvements and how they further the school's mission?
Yes, as you mentioned, Hillary, this is our centennial year, marking our 100th year of Holy Child education in Summit. We are very proud of that legacy and excited about our future here in this town.
One of the adages of our founder is that we must meet the wants of the age, and this concept impels us to be reflective and to evolve, making sure that the educational experience at Oak Knoll serves our students well, year after year, decade after decade. And in this case, in this particular milestone, it begs us to ask this question as we enter our second century. During my time at Oak Knoll, I reviewed the academic and mission-related needs of the school, striving to stay relevant and current with best practices in teaching and learning. And there are several challenges that we've struggled with over many years that we've asked NK Architects and Dynamic Engineering to help us find creative solutions to address these challenges, improve the function of our program and facilities, and help us deliver on our mission to educate young people in the very best way possible. The concepts that we're sharing tonight reflect the culmination of our efforts to address our institutional needs and respond to and incorporate the feedback we've received from our neighbors over the last 2 years. There are 6 primary objectives of the plan, but before I touch on each of those 6, I thought it might be helpful to quickly highlight some of the characteristics of our campus. The school is called, it's named Oak Knoll, and named as such because of the tall oak trees that are on the property there, but also because the school is situated on a knoll. It's essentially built on top of a hill. This is both beautiful and challenging for us. We have a beautiful location looking kind of over Memorial Field in a residential area, but it also is not kind of a flat property, which creates a little bit of a challenge for us. We also have several fronts to our campus, with perimeters on Blackburn Road, on Prospect Street, on Larned Road, and on Ashland Road. We love our location and also face challenges by how we're situated, and having this in mind just helps illustrate some of the issues that we're trying to solve and how the creative solutions that we are seeking are necessary in order for us to work through those challenges. So the objectives of the plan fall into 6 categories. The first is programmatic, the second, environmental sustainability, the third, accessibility, the fourth, parking, the fifth, stormwater management, and the last, landscaping. So I'll begin with programmatic. Regarding our programmatic needs, we are primarily seeking to increase our flexibility with academic and extracurricular space. We currently operate at a room usage rate that creates significant challenges for the teaching and learning experience for our teachers and our students. So in short, we need more space, more classroom space for the population that we currently have to maximize the benefit of our program. We are also challenged by shared spaces, particularly for PE, for physical education, and for performances. We have 1 gym for 14 grade levels, which restricts the schedule in both of our divisions, both in our lower school and in our upper school. It limits the recess opportunities and options for our lower school students, particularly during inclement weather, and creates tremendous difficulty with our scheduling, and the space just simply doesn't accommodate all of our needs. Additionally, our upper school students do not have any casual gathering space, and our upper school faculty members do not have a faculty room. This impacts our library, which becomes a de facto gathering space for students, which then creates a situation for other students who are seeking quiet spaces to study to try to find a different place to study, and just creates a general challenge with the use of those spaces. Regarding environmental sustainability, one of the responsibilities set forth by the goals and criteria of Holy Child Education, by which we are bound, is, quote, to accept and respond to the moral obligation for the conscientious care of creation. We have a committee that is partnering with experts on environmental sustainability and ways that we can do our part to reduce our carbon footprint and improve our energy efficiency. And the building plans that we have in mind here will help us improve in those areas in multiple buildings. Regarding accessibility, we are also looking to improve barrier-free access. We do not have elevators in several of our buildings on our campus, and it can be very difficult to navigate the campus, especially for someone who is injured or has any other mobility challenges. This plan would allow us to have elevators in 2 buildings, which would be a significant improvement for our campus. Ralph Rosenberg from NK Architects will present in detail the plans for the campus improvements for us. Related to parking, we have too few spaces on site to accommodate our needs. Based on the feedback from the neighbors and specific requests from the prior zoning officer, Krista Anderson, at the Technical Review Committee meeting to look at creative solutions to alleviate some of the parking issues faced by the school, the application proposes to add a 19-car parking area behind Mulcahy Hall at 76 Prospect Street. The school has piloted the use of these additional on-site parking spaces behind Mulcahy Hall with notification to the city as requested, which has had very good results. These additional on-site spaces improved the challenges we face and improved parking concerns on the perimeter roadways. I should note, this application is specifically and primarily designed to address current educational, academic, and administrative needs of the existing Oak Knoll community, and in no way is designed to increase enrollment beyond what it has been over the years. Additionally, the application does not contemplate any increase in existing conditions relative to off-site and perimeter parking and perimeter vehicular circulation. In fact, the proposal should reduce some of the perimeter parking issues because of the addition of the proposed on-site parking. Although the proposed application will improve the parking issues in the area, it will not eliminate them. The school and I personally recognize that parking and circulation will be an ongoing subject, and we are prepared to engage in a collaborative process once this application is completed to explore ways to address those items which will involve the neighbors, the school, and the city of Summit. Once the application is concluded, the school will be happy to facilitate a meeting with the designated representatives of these three essential groups to explore opportunities and creative ways to address parking in the area surrounding the school. Craig Paraguay from Dynamic Traffic will speak more about parking and circulation later this evening. Regarding stormwater management is a concern that is shared between the school and the neighbors. We have partnered with Dynamic Engineering to assess the current situation and develop a plan to manage stormwater. The application that we have submitted includes a stormwater management plan, which will capture all the additional runoff created by the proposed improvements and will improve current conditions and provide additional relief. Dan Sanal from Dynamic will walk the board through those elements of the plan as well. And lastly, regarding landscaping, we have taken steps to address the aesthetic of Larned Road, as well as the additional screening of campus and the new proposed parking area and gym addition to make sure that the campus perimeter is attractive and in line with the beauty of the neighborhood. Marla Roller, licensed landscape architect from Dynamic Engineering, will touch on those elements of the plan.
Thank you. And recognizing that the school's professionals will testify in more detail, can you briefly provide the board with a general overview of what is proposed as part of this application to meet the objectives that you've just laid out?
Yes. The two additions proposed to our gym, Tisdall Hall, will create much-needed flexible space and provide ADA accessibility to the building. It will also allow us to move our nurses station to our main level, which will be more effective and efficient for helping sick or injured students. The lower Connolly addition will provide additional classrooms, a community commons, and an innovation lab. We are currently operating below the industry standard with the number of classrooms that we have, and additionally, the lack of a community commons and lounge space has negatively impacted the use of our library and some offices. This addition will allow us to add an elevator, which we currently do not have in this building, and this elevator will go a long way in helping individuals with injury and other mobility challenges to navigate our campus more easily. The upper Connolly addition will provide us with additional classroom space and student lounge space as well, which will also serve to mitigate the challenges that I've noted with our space. And through this application, we also seek to reincorporate 72 Prospect Street House back into the school's footprint, which would also provide us with a total of 8 additional parking spots there. And lastly, we seek to add 19-space parking area behind Mulcahy Hall, as noted earlier.
And just for clarification, are the improvements proposed designed to increase enrollment?
No, as stated previously, the improvements are to meet the current academic, educational, and administrative needs and improve the function of our programming facilities.
Okay, you mentioned incorporating 72 Prospect Street back into the school use. Can you tell the board and members of the interested public what is proposed for that building?
Yes, as mentioned earlier, 72 Prospect Street was actually part of the school's campus from 1952 to 1971, and it is our hope to bring the building back into the campus. The proposal is to leave the existing home, carriage house, and driveways as they are, because they are beautiful elements of the area, and we are not seeking to change the aesthetic at all. We'd like it to maintain the residential look and feel. As for proposed uses, the school is looking to use that building for offices, possibly including marketing and communications, advancement, enrollment management, or business functions, as well as storage, and then having facilities and maintenance use in the carriage house.
And why are these uses a good fit for the space?
These would be the best since the house is not located in the primary part of campus and those functions are not student-focused, so we wouldn't have students walking to that portion of the campus. They would not require changes to the house in any substantial way, and it would help alleviate challenges on the main part of campus, allowing for spaces currently used for offices to become some meeting rooms and other spaces. The existing carriage house in the back of the property will be used for maintenance on the first floor in the garage area, and there's an existing apartment on the second floor, which is occupied by an employee of the school who is also on call for 24 hours a day in the event of any emergencies or issues on campus.
Perfect. And have you had an opportunity to review the administrative comments with regard to this application?
Yes.
In response to those comments, can you tell the board the location and timing of the garbage and recycling pickup?
Yes, garbage and recycling are currently stored outside of the back of Connolly Dining Hall. Both are picked up daily, Monday through Friday, at approximately 6 a.m. by a disposal service company with whom we have a contract.
And this application wouldn't change that, right?
That's correct.
And can you confirm the timing of the site lighting, recognizing the architect and civil engineer will testify later regarding the proposed additional lighting?
Yes, all outside parking lot and building external lighting are set on manual timers. The timers are set from sunset to sunrise and are internal to the campus and do not spill into the neighboring properties. We are proposing lighting in the new parking area for safety purposes, and Dan will go into more detail about that aspect of the plan.
With regard to the parking on site, can you tell the board if there are assigned parking for students and employees?
Yes, the school has 15 spots for regular student drivers and an additional space used by students who may have injuries or other needs that require them to park on campus in that designated spot. There are a few other designated spots for visitors and the head of school, and the rest are open parking spaces for employees.
Oak Knoll's campus has been the subject of prior approvals from the City of Summit. Can you confirm for the board if the school has complied or is in compliance with any applicable conditions of those prior approvals?
Yes, I've reviewed all the prior resolutions of approval for the school's property, and the school is in compliance with all the conditions of the prior approvals with one exception. This condition relates to the 2008 approval, which was for the incorporation of 76 Prospect Street, which is now Mulcahy Hall, into the school's use, and it required that students not park within the first 16 spaces on Larned Road closest to Ashland. I have looked into this, and it is an area that we have not been in compliance. We do have community members who have been parking in that area. It used to be an area used by buses to line up for afternoon pickup. However, there are few buses that come now, and over time, drivers began to park there. I would ask that this be a change in the condition from 2008. It's consistent with the rest of the use of Larned Road and is also helpful in limiting the number of cars that would then seek to park on other streets. The application is requesting an additional modification of one of the conditions of the approval from 2008. That condition, which was the result of discussions and comments with the then neighbor at 72 Prospect Street, prohibited the school from using Mulcahy Hall for parking. This application proposes a 19-space parking area in the rear of Mulcahy Hall, which will be heavily screened from view by the neighbors and which will alleviate some of the parking congestion around the perimeter of the school.
Thank you. Has the school had any neighborhood meetings associated with the proposal?
Yes, the school has had 4 neighborhood meetings on September 29th, 2022, December 8th, 2022, September 13th, 2023, and January 9th, 2025.
And what was the outcome of those meetings?
Overall, the meetings were positive. The neighbors have been thoughtful in their engagement with us, and it has been extremely helpful to have a dialogue with them and hear their insights and concerns, which really did help us shape the final plans of what has been proposed in this application. We've been able to address what we can in the short term and also consider some creative solutions for the long term, and I truly thank our neighbors for their engagement throughout this process.
And although they have been mentioned, can you just state if you have any professionals that have been retained to assist in the development of plans and the presentation of this application?
Yes, civil engineers Dan Sanal and Danielle Lisreiner, architects Walter Neese and Ralph Rosenberg, landscape architect Marla Roller, traffic engineer Craig Paragoy, and planner John Berry.
Thanks. I don't have any other questions.
Great. Do our board experts have any questions for this witness?
I don't, Mr. Chairman.
No, I had some, but I think they were adequately answered of this applicant, so.
Perfect. Thank you. Any questions from the board for this witness?
I just have one question. 72 Prospect Street, you says it was part of the campus?
Yes.
So it's not used at all for the school?
Correct. Right now, the school does own the property, but it is rented out to it's a residential home for a
Okay.
family.
I have a question as well. You said that the school is right now operating sort of below the standard for the number of classrooms. Can you tell us a little bit more what that means? Like, what is the standard?
Sure, I can. So this was one of the first things I was asked to do upon my arrival at Oak Knoll when I was the head of the upper school. I had recently done some work at my previous school on scheduling and analysis of room usage. The industry standard says that schools should operate at about 75% usage of a given classroom, which allows some flexibility. At Oak Knoll, I'd say 80% of our classrooms, this is in our upper school, are operating at 100% usage. And the 20% that are not are rooms that are specialized rooms. So for example, the dark room or the dance studio or an art room. So what happens if you have a bunch of kids that are all signing up for, let's say, AP European History, and you need to break that class into 2 sections to accommodate them because there's a lot of interest that year, we wouldn't necessarily have a spot to put that other section. So it doesn't mean that we have more students, we just have maybe more who want to take that particular class, but we don't have the flexibility to put those kids in another space. Additionally, and this was something that we ran into a few years ago, we had a pipe burst in a radiator over the weekend, and it kind of washed out 2 of our classrooms, and it really compromised our ability to be flexible, and we had to end up running classes in a conference room and one in our chapel while those classrooms were fixed due to that flooding. So it just puts us in a position of lacking flexibility, and it's really not what's best for kind of teaching and learning experiences, especially at these grade levels.
Yeah, just 2 questions. You mentioned there were 15 student parking spaces. Do you know how many students drive?
About 65 students drive, give or take. It's our policy states that our seniors are drivers, and that class, you know, the number of seniors we have fluctuates a bit, but generally 65 to 70 is our graduating class.
And you had mentioned that using, I think it's 72 Prospect now would become the administrative offices building, so to speak?
Yes, some of
So
them.
the administrative offices that are currently, I believe is it Conley Hall?
So
No.
we have administrative offices in several buildings.
Okay.
Mulcahy Hall is at 76 Prospect Street, so we would potentially maybe have some folks move there, but also some folks who are in the primary part of campus could move to 72, which would then give us a little more of that breathing, that elbow room on the primary.
Right, so like today I went to the main building on Blackburn, the old,
Okay, so
the
the
old,
stone building is Grace
Correct.
Hall.
Grace
The
Hall.
brick building is Connolly Hall.
Okay.
And then the houses on the
Yep.
corner of Prospect are Mulcahy, and we currently call it 72, but it used to be called Gracemere. when
Okay,
it
so
was-
the Grace Hall is where the administrative offices are, I can't speak, where the administrative offices are currently located, it's like your office?
My office is, yes.
So would you move to the new building?
I would not,
Okay.
but we might have our enrollment management team, who was also in Grace Hall with me, they might move there, which would then give us some space into that building, but we haven't figured out exactly.
Okay,
what's
and then those empty spaces would become what?
So a couple of different things. So we could put a faculty room in that space. We're also seeking to put a joint faculty room for our upper and lower school in the lower Connolly addition, so that we have a space that's for all. But when you walk into Grace Hall, my office is immediately on the left, my assistant's office is ahead and on the, I'm sorry, I'm on the right. She's up ahead on the left. We could move her office, this is just an example, next to mine, and then that office could become a smaller conference room. We right now have one conference room on the upper part of campus, which is challenging. If we have a leadership team meeting or a board meeting, and then another group wants to meet, we don't really have a space for that.
Thank you.
Tom?
Yeah, a couple questions about parking. You mentioned, obviously, there are more students who drive than who have parking spaces. Where do they currently park? I think I know anecdotally, but just for the record.
Yes, they park on Larned Road, on Ashland Road, and Blackburn Place.
Okay. And how many spaces of the new spaces behind, I guess you mentioned 2 locations for new spaces, and maybe you said this and I didn't hear it. Are they all designated for student parking, or how many?
No, they would not be. So we don't have enough parking to accommodate all of our employees and all of our students. So we have employees who are parking off-site, and we have students who are parking off-site. So bringing, if we were to put the parking behind Mulcahy Hall at 76, that would very likely become the parking for the people who work in that building. So that would be for adults. We may be able to add, you know, a student spot here or there, but generally we'd be looking to bring our employees onto the campus, and then have the student parking satisfied by the parking spots that are already designated for them on campus, plus the ones that they're utilizing offsite.
And between the two new parking locations, how many total spots was it? I think it was 30-something, or?
Additional?
Yeah.
Let me get my cheat sheet out.
I believe it's 21.
21
21?
is the net increase.
Net increase, so there'd be 21 cars presumably off the street parking and.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. I think that's all I had. Thank you.
You had mentioned the 2008 conditions.
Yes.
Can you expand on the non-compliance, that one clause?
Yes, so in that, in reviewing that application, one of the conditions was, so Larned Road extends from Prospect to Ashland. So the condition stated that the first 16 spots from Ashland back should not have parking in them.
So I just want to, it should not have student parking.
Student parking, I'm sorry, should not have student parking. So in reviewing that, I had us assess kind of where we stood with that, and we are not in compliance. There have been people parking, not always all the way, but not 16 back. And I think that happened over time, to be honest, as that used to be a spot where buses would sit, so they weren't idling on in front of, houses in the other areas. So they would park there waiting for afternoon pickup. We don't really have as many buses as we used to, so that need isn't there anymore, and I think just over time, people just started parking in those spots. And we recently became aware of that, in looking over all of these past applications and resolutions, and wanted to be forthcoming with, that was one area that we've not been in compliance with.
With the absorption of 72 Prospect, all that parking happens basically parallel to your property,
Correct.
right? From Blackburn to Ashland?
Prospect to Ashland.
Prospect to Ashland, yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
I just had one more question about the parking on Ashland, just because I know that is a spot where you're competing with Brayton School
Yes.
for pickup and drop off and everything. Are any of those spots, do they have time limits on them? I don't actually remember on Ashland right there by the, no, right? Like, okay, so it's not, that doesn't need to be like a special condition either for allowing
No,
parking,
not in that
okay.
spot.
I have a question about parking. You mentioned that there's like 65 to 75 students that drive, there's seniors. What happens if a junior wants to drive? I mean, there's
So I
there's
can
no.
tell you what it says in our handbook. Hang on, let me pull that up. We allow juniors to request to drive to campus after May 1st, because our seniors go on what we call a capstone project for the month of May. So we try through our policy to kind of mitigate having too many student drivers. On occasion, there might be a hardship in a particular family. We do draw from about 68 different towns. So occasionally we entertain an exception for a student, but generally we try to keep it with the seniors.
So how would you know if a junior drove and parked on
We
Ashland?
wouldn't necessarily, but we do pay kind of close attention, and we'd probably hear it honestly from the seniors.
Touche.
Okay.
Any other questions? Great.
Let me,
Go ahead, Mr. Stein.
probably shouldn't ask this one, but I will anyway. You've got a lot of issues here. Has there been, within your board, within your administration, thoughts of maybe this isn't the right location? And perhaps should we be looking, as other schools have done?
You know, that hasn't come up. We love this town and we love where we are. And especially now in our 100th year, and honestly having alums come back who have been part of our community for a very long time, and generations of families who have sent their children to the school, that hasn't come up as something that I think would be something the school would want to do. We love kind of where we are.
Okay.
All right, so we will now open up to questions from the public, questions only. So if someone has a question for this witness, please come up. State your name, spell your last name,
Sure. It's
and give us your address.
WU.
Okay?
So I'm just going to, a couple questions.
Yes.
So,
What's your address, sir?
oh, sure, 45 Blackburn Road.
Thank you so much.
Sure. You had mentioned not increase enrollment. Is there anything preventing you from increasing enrollment down the road? Someone on a Facebook group mentioned that it's capped by the city, the enrollment. Is that true?
Not that, I'm not aware of a cap by the city. No, our enrollment, it fluctuates over time, but generally, we like to stay within a range that kind of feels right for how our program works.
Because my concern is the traffic. I know now you don't want to increase enrollment.
Sir,
but that's-
questions only.
Okay, sorry, okay. Another question is 72 Prospect, is it currently paying property taxes?
I believe so.
So
I
when it gets
believe it
incorporated
is.
into the main lot, is it still going to pay property taxes?
I would have to defer to Hillary on that.
I don't know the answer at this time.
So I'm wondering if there's revenue. No, sorry, that's not a question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Do you have the opportunity to ask questions for each specialist?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you will.
Sir, I have one question following up on that. What is current enrollment? And you said fluctuate, so what's the range?
Yes, so our current enrollment is 502. We generally fluctuate between 500 and 560. If we were to go up, it wouldn't be with driving students. It's usually in kind of some of the lower grade levels where we would have more enrollment.
Thank you.
So when you did the previous applications, and there were sort of conditions, right, set, and those were also based on a student population, like at the time of the last application, do you know how many students you had?
I don't know that offhand, but we have done an analysis, I think, over the last dozen years, and I think 60, kind of a 60-student swing was within that range.
How many members do you have on staff?
I believe I have that 136. right now?
136.
136, and that's full and part-time.
And that fluctuates, as we had submitted to the board, between 130 and 140.
Additional questions from the audience?
Should I say that or come up?
No, you can come up.
Okay.
State your name, spell your last name, and give us your address, please.
My name is Isabel Rogers. My last name is Rodgers, and I live at 92 Prospect Street.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I missed the current enrollment. What was that?
502.
502. So you guys are on the very low end. You said the swing will be, in your affidavit, be between 500 and 560.
Correct.
So that could be a large swing up.
Yes.
Than the current, what we're dealing with now. Question for you. You mentioned that the current lights, or the lighting system for the parking lot would be on a timer from sunrise to sunset. Currently, your lights on the parking lot are not on that timer. They go surpass. Are they on this? Will it
To
be
be
on
from
this
sunset to sunrise, so there's light during the dark time.
sunset to okay, so it will never turn off at night. It's just going to be a constant flow all night.
Some of the lights on campus, yes.
And that's existing, right?
Right, that's existing.
And for the proposed parking lot at 70.
That, I think, would be answered by the engineer
Okay,
when he
great.
testifies.
Perfect. And then you mentioned that the goal is to keep 72 and 76 intact as their, to keep the residential look and feel, but adding a parking lot directly behind the historical and view of everything, do you think that is also in the look and feel of residential?
We would do everything we could to maintain the integrity of the house, the property, the neighborhood. We really love and respect where we are and wouldn't want to do anything that compromised the aesthetic for ourselves or for our neighbors. So we would be working with our engineers and landscape architects to do everything we could to maintain that aesthetic and make it as pleasing as possible, while also trying to mitigate some of the parking challenges.
Okay, great. I can come back up and ask the lighting
Sure,
specifically.
yes.
Yes, thank you.
Bix Ellenbecker, Ellenbecker, 92 Prospect. You mentioned there's a pilot program earlier that went with the parking, correct?
Yes.
And that was hunky-dory, as you said. And that was for which spots?
Those spots, it was behind 76.
But not, the 19 was not piloted, correct?
It was, the spot that we were proposing is the spot where it was piloted.
How was that done? Were lines chalked out, like you're
No.
parking at a ball field? How was 19 spots piloted behind 72?
We actually were able to pilot more than 19, and our security team was instrumental in helping the traffic flow with our employees. So we did it a few times last year when there was a change in the parking around our campus. There have been some alterations to, there were some no parking signs that had been put up, and it caused a bit of a situation for some of our employees who typically parked in those spots. So we asked and got permission to have, to kind of go up the driveway of 76 and park in the back there, mostly along the back perimeter and the side perimeter. And our security guards helped manage that to make sure that it was safe and efficient.
So 19 spots were occupied in this exact area as part of the pilot, and you curb cutted them out onto Blackburn.
We did not do
So-
the curb cut.
So circulation was not, the pilot program did not circulate
That's-
out onto Blackburn.
That's
They were
correct.
circulated back through the property and then out.
It did not, no. It only circulated kind of within that property itself, so it did not go back
So
onto
there
the
was no
main road.
exit enter as part of the pilot program.
That's correct.
Just
We were simply
get into your park,
piloting.
drive around, couple whirlies, and then shut it down.
What we were doing was, for certain events and certain times, we were parking there for the day. So we weren't just doing this for kind of a few minutes. We parked there for maybe 3 or 4 days in a row based on the situation
And
that was
they entered
happening.
from where?
They entered from the driveway on 76 and also exited from the driveway on 76.
Very good. So they did not exit off of the Blackwood as currently showed as
I
part of the
think we've
pilot
made that
program.
pretty clear.
Correct. We were not piloting the exit, we were piloting the number of spots that could fit in that spot.
Sir, also keep in mind that they're going to have an expert witness testify about the specifics of
I got you.
parking.
Get to it. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. Serge Masura, 51 Blackburn Road. Does Oakville currently offer traffic control in the morning, afternoon departures, or special events?
We do with our own security guard, but not on the main streets of Summit, if that makes sense. And our security guards are not permitted to direct traffic from the streets of Summit. They are permitted to direct traffic within the confines of our campus.
Okay.
And it's with a robust security team that does that internally.
With this new flow, is the intention to offer traffic control
I
on
don't,
the streets?
so it is not, because I do not think it's an option. It's something that we have looked into, and there wasn't the capacity for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none, Hillary?
All
Move on
right.
to your next witness.
Ralph Rosenberg.
Mr. Rosenberg, can we swear you in?
We
Thank you
want to
so
swear
much.
you in. Yep.
Please state your name for the record.
Ralph Rosenberg, R-O-S-E-N-B-E-R-G.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Can I just ask you about your qualifications, please?
Yes, I'm a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey, as well as a licensed planner since 1988. I testified in front of many boards, including Jersey City, Bayonne, Teaneck, Paramus, Morristown, Long Park, in a long time. So,
The board accepts this expert.
We will.
thank you.
Welcome, Mr. Rosenberg. Please begin.
Can you just tell the board what steps you took to prepare yourself for your testimony this evening?
Yes, NK has been on campus, I think, we're approaching our 5th year on campus. So in those 5 years, we've walked the campus, met with everybody, the administrators, faculty, security guards, and we've come to know the site, we've come to know the buildings, we've come to know Summit, and I think we checked every box as far as due diligence to get to know the school and campus as much as the people who work there daily.
And did you review the administrative reviews and the ordinance and confer with?
Yes, I have.
Okay, great. Did you prepare plans for the school that meet and address the objectives laid out by Ms. Landis in her testimony?
Yes, I have.
And can you go through those plans, which are incorporated into a slideshow presentation, which I would ask be marked Exhibit A1,
Yes,
with the board, and describe what is existing and what is proposed?
yes. Let me just take a minute or two. I hope this all works.
Success.
There
Thank goodness.
It's always a good feeling,
That-
isn't it?
That's what it is. Um, can we do handouts,
Sure, I can hand them out while you start.
These are printed versions of what we're seeing on screen?
Yes,
Okay,
right,
thank you.
correct?
Yes, then, what we've done is we've taken all of the previous exhibits that we've submitted for review and sort of reshuffled the deck a little bit with some new exhibits to sort of tell a better story for this application. So as I go through it, we're gonna talk about some of the variance definitions and some of the variance applications to help make the whole presentation go a lot smoother.
Thank you.
Can we start?
Please.
Like we said earlier, it's been, I think it's been 4 or 5 years, and, we've got to know the site. The topography is a challenge, like previously mentioned. And this first slide is really a composite of basically everything, and it talks about a lot of conditions at hand. One, it talks about existing conditions. There are 4 academic buildings on site. See the cursor from the...
Ralph, can I ask a question of the attorney first? Should we be marking this as A1 or?
It is, yes.
Yes, it is.
It is marked A1,
Yes.
thank you.
So there are 4 existing academic buildings on site. So the upper left is called Tisdale Hall, which is the gymnasium athletic facility. On the bottom of the page, lower left, is Bonaventura. That is the early lower school. Right in the middle of the campus is the larger of the 4 buildings. It's called Connolly Hall. There are 2 additions proposed on Connolly Hall. And to the far right center of the campus is Grace Hall. That's the old historical mansion on the property. To the far right is the 76 house and the 76 Prospect and 72 Prospect on the far right on Prospect Street. Along the back, parallel to Wanted Road, is the large playing field and the tennis courts as well. Now, let me just go back one. What the slide represents also is everything in orange are the new building additions proposed. Now, we're proposing a variance for that building coverage of 1%. Now, what that means is we're allowed 15% site coverage for building footprints. We're at 16%. And that's relevant with this diagram because that extra 1% is about 4,600 square feet. And we've tried every which way possible to reduce all of this orange down by 4,600 square feet to take the variance off the table. But the compromises to all of those programs, like Ms. Lanter's reference, really was too much of a deficiency asked for the school after all these years of planning and programming for the future academic needs. So again, even if we were able to reduce the orange by 4,600 square feet, we would still have a lot coverage variance and we would still have an FAR variance. So we reevaluated all that and kept it on the table today before you tonight, asking for that 16%. So with all of that said and done, because the building footprints are the building footprints, by default, we have existing floor area ratios that are existing non-conforming, that just gets a little bit larger, and the lot coverage, which is pavement, parking, roofs, buildings, that also becomes a little bit longer, a little bit larger than existing, but it still is a non-conforming. So that's the big picture of those 2 variants for building coverage, FAR, and lot area coverage. As we proceed through, like was previously mentioned, Connolly Hall is the biggest of the two academic buildings central to the campus. And Connolly Hall sort of represents two separate buildings. The upper part of Connolly is called Upper Connolly, and the lower part of Connolly, the larger of the four districts, is the biggest footprint for extent. And unfortunately, the top part of Connolly does not have access to the lower part of Connolly in an accessible ADA way. So now we have two elevators planned for Connolly to have the upper part of Connolly accessible, independent from the lower part of Connolly being accessible. So what all that means is there's two elevator cores proposed for Upper Connolly and Lower Connolly, of the three elevator programs for the entire campus. What this plan represents is a lower level, which is halfway in the ground, which is an innovation lab. Now the whole school campus between lower school and upper school has this new lab proposed, really, which is the makerspace. Really, students can explore three-dimensional thinking, modeling, and creating. That has full access to an elevated core, which is directly parallel across the parking aisle to the Bonaventura. So now the building has access to the three levels proposed with a ramp and two new fire escapes. On the first level, we're calling the first level, which is the addition to the cafeteria, the multi-purpose room. So we can see from this diagram, I hope we can see from this diagram, it's kind of small. So the cafeteria, the dining component gets expanded into the student commons. To the left is the wellness component of the campus, which is student mental health and wellness, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, et cetera, as well as campus counseling as well. And the need for Connolly, I guess throughout all of campus, is the lack of efficient bathroom, restroom cores. And two of those are proposed as well in this lower Connolly addition. On the top part of Connolly, the third level, but it really is not the third floor, but the third level of those 5 general classroom additions. Those 5 general classroom additions allows the existing program spaces to really repurpose, as Mrs. Landis pointed out. They need those extra non-traditional teaching environments. All of those programs to make that efficiency that was talked about to be 75%, not the 100%, to free up some of those needed programs for Oak Knoll. On the top floor, again, we have a roof plan. That roof plan really is important because that gives us the pitch roof character that we are proposing to break up this flat roof massing of the existing Connolly to make it more residential, picking up a lot of clues from Grace Hall, et cetera, as well as giving me that rooftop screening device for those rooftop mechanical units. Now this picture is important because this is the existing condition of the corner of Connolly, Lower Connolly Hall, which is, again, it's a brick building that has this colonial cornice, large window penetrations, and it's directly south of Grace Hall, which is seen, to the right side of this photograph. Grace Hall really is the genesis of all the architectural decisions that we've made. You can see the stone veneer, you see the brick detailing, you see the simulated slate high-pitched roofs, and you see this narrow slot vertical windows combined with the large big horizontal windows. So all of those elements from Grace Hall gave us clues to really make the additions much more coherent with the existing campus. And we did a quick sketch of that Lower Connolly addition, and that's what's on the screen now. So it's a 2-story building, but it comes out of the ground a half a story higher, just by the simple grades and aligning with existing floor elevations. So we have 2 stories on top of the stone base, again, the same stone that we're going to find on Grace Hall. It's capped by a sloped mansard roof, which screens the mechanical units from Bonaventura and further out towards Ashland. So we think the context of this addition really softens that big block of the existing Connolly Hall to the campus. And all that means in the elevation diagrams that we've submitted for review are shown here in this exhibit. So all of that backstory is represented in this one exhibit that we've submitted back in June 18th was the revised submission. next largest project, Connolly Hall being
Oh,
the
sorry, I'm
largest.
just gonna interrupt you for 1 second. Can you just explain to the board what are the variances needed for this Lower Connolly addition?
I'm sorry, that's a good point. Let me go back one, because that's an important component. What's highlighted in red on the top part of this drawing are 2 side yard setbacks. And one existing non-conforming setback exists at 28 feet to the side yard property. And we can see that from sort of this little jutted out corner of the building, top, middle. That's an existing projection, 1 story to the side rear property line. We're proposing to expand our kitchen services to go a little bit further into that 50 feet to 34 feet, I believe.
34.2.
34.2 feet. So we're encroaching inside that 50, but we're not encroaching near enough as the existing non-conforming to that rear yard, I'm sorry, side yard of the existing property. So it is one of the variances, but the detriment is not as bad as what's existing. And it is only a 1-story projection on that 3-story building to that side yard setback.
And what is the square footage of
That's
the
about-
area in
Of that
setback?
one block?
In the area of the setback, just in the area of the setback? I believe it was 320 square feet.
320 square feet measured to the outside of that block. Again, 1 story, going a little bit deeper into that 50, but not as deep as the existing non-conforming of the 28.
And there is mature screening on in the rear yards of the properties that are
Yeah,
adjacent.
That's heavily landscaped, there's some picnic areas back there, there's some pathways surrounded by shrubbery and trees.
And then can you just explain the height variances for Lower Connolly?
Um, I don't believe it's a height variance.
So from the average grade, it's 44.4 feet, and for the high-low, it's 48.6 feet.
Now, from the average grade for Lower Connolly, it's, see, the definition of height is taken from an average grade, and the average grade on this diagram almost comes up to the top of that 2nd floor window. So, I'm sorry. So the height variance is a result of the average grade comes to the middle of the rear elevation that measures itself to the top of the ridge of that mansard roof. So the reality is that it is high as point of average grade, but in reality, it comes in less than the required 35 feet. So the average grade reference line through all of Connolly, and as well through Tisdale, when I get to Tisdale, is an abstract reference point, which is below the building, because the site is sloped. It takes into account the average from the high to the low, and in the middle is the point of reference. So it still is a 2-story building, it's not a 3-story building, because it does not come out of the ground more than 6 feet, more than 50% of the perimeter of the footprint. So it's a little,
But you would say the topography in this area and matching it up with the existing building create a hardship in meeting the height requirements.
correct.
And including the architectural details to make sure it has a residential feel, and the fact that it is located interior to the site.
Correct. It's located interior site. Again, a point of reference, the top 3rd level, if we can see from this diagram, we eliminated most of the brick. The brick massing of this building really stopped at the level 2. And you can see from reference behind this slope mansard, you can see the existing corners of Connolly Hall. So from Ashland, beyond the cornice line, and from Bonaventura, beyond the cornice line in mansard, there's another story of an existing Connolly behind that rises up another story higher, which is the Campion Theater Center.
Perfect.
So the whole topography of this hill coming through Connolly, the complex equation, but it's always 2-story building coming out of the ground at different points of measurement, but still no higher than the existing Connolly building that we were appending to.
Perfect.
It's a little tricky.
Right, thank you. If you want to go to Tisdale now. I'm
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt.
Can I ask
That's-
a question before we go?
Sure.
So you're telling me that the new addition is not higher than Connolly Hall? or it is?
The new addition is not taller than the existing Connolly Hall. The existing Connolly Hall with the Campion Theater Center is taller than the proposed addition.
I can't read that.
That's the existing.
Well, I think
Oh,
the,
that's the
part of the
existing.
confusion is, you're only referring to lower Connolly Hall right now.
Oh,
Right,
not the
correct.
upper.
Yeah, right, and it-
when you
because it's
factor in
all
the
one
upper,
building
It's
and-
5 levels on
Right.
sheet A10.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of hard, because it's going to be one building, so the reference point of just lower Connolly Hall is confusing.
So it's different because it's,
see it,
you know, the
yeah.
perspective that you're looking at it from. And then when you have to, again, measure around, you have to, because it's all one building, you measure around the entire building. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's a little bit more complicated than,
I went back to this one, because this could, from the perspective of the lower field, Bonaventura, you could see the building in the background.
So
Mr.
that's-
Rosenberg, why don't you go to A3 and then just point out to the board that line in the elevation in the background?
I'm sorry.
Yes. There you go.
Yeah.
If you could just show, point out, there you go, perfect.
Yeah, this top,
There you go.
I don't know, can you see the mouse?
yes.
Oh,
we
you
can.
can't. I can't see the mouse on my monitor, but you can see the mouse on the screen, which is
Mhm.
Yeah.
perfect. I can't even find it. Anyway,
Even
the
if you
top-
want to
Yeah,
walk
right
over
there,
and
yeah.
point it out.
All right, I'm sorry about that. That top line, parallel to the top border, is the cornice line of the existing camping center of Connolly Hall, one building back, that's still part of the same mega structure we call
Okay.
Connolly.
And then that little section with the vertical windows, the long vertical windows.
Right.
That's currently lower Conley Hall, or is that the addition?
This is the addition of Lower Connolly Hall.
No, but he's asking the windows
Those
in the
long
back.
vertical windows.
Those are existing.
Those are existing, right?
Those are
Right.
existing, right.
So that's-
everything's
that is
shaded
currently
in
Yeah,
lower
that is
color.
there on site right now, yes.
I'm sorry.
All right, now I'm getting confused. What we're looking at here, that
go
that
up to
upper
this.
image, that's
Yeah.
facing Bonaventura Hall?
Let me go up to this.
Yes, yes, correct.
This,
It is.
this
Yes.
line in the back and everything white is existing Bonaventura.
Okay.
Everything that we start to tone out gray is a proposed addition to, I'm sorry. In the back and this part is the existing Connolly.
That's
Hall.
Upper Connolly.
You See this cornice line?
Yes.
That's the top of the existing campus theater center of Connolly Hall.
So
It's
that
all
very-
one building, but it steps and tiers as it goes up the hill.
That very faded gray in the background, that's existing building, and that double line, double, triple line on top there, that's the top of the existing building,
And that's the top of the existing
At-
building.
at the
Yes.
top of the hill.
Yes.
Okay.
Top of the hill. So the hill goes up, and then everything gray tone and brick color is the proposed lower Connolly addition.
Got it.
That's the-
Sorry.
What time to get this? Now, the second largest, project campus is Tisdale, which is a gymnastic athletic center. Currently, what's toned in white is the existing gymnasium, which has, the necessary locker rooms, restrooms, lobby, open stair, no elevator, mechanical space, et cetera. We're proposing to sandwich this building to what was earlier discussed as a need for a secondary multi-purpose athletic venue. Done for the lower school, but also just for a general flex space, for the whole campus to share. This is a proposal that talks about a small multi-purpose room that is proposed to be built on the south of the existing Tisdale Hall. And next to the proposed multi-purpose room is another additional fitness center weight room. To the north of this addition, which is sort of sandwiched of the existing entrance facing Connolly, is a new elevator tower, stair tower, and some faculty offices, et cetera. So now this building would have accessibility to get to the second level, which currently it does not. It will have a secondary multi-purpose athletic room for the lower school predominantly. And inside that one venue for the lower school, we are proposing a small sort of raised up stage for those performances and multi-use for this building. On the second floor, there are some general classrooms. We're proposing more faculty offices. Again, that elevator rises up, the new fire stair rises up, and then storage space as well rises up. We're in the middle of finalizing the renovation program of this building, but all inside the existing envelope, with the two new additions, which are proposed in gray. would be exactly as described, multipurpose room, fitness center, elevator, stair, etc. The existing context of Tisdall, as seen mostly from Ashland, it's a brick building, it has a lot of accent stripes. It's a flat roof building with a small little ridge down center, which accentuates the entrance and the stair and lobby. From Ashland, it has some large windows, it's articulated in a much more graphic way than the traditional Connolly. It's a little out of keeping with what we see on Grace Hall, but at the same time, we have respect for it. So this reference is a sketch that proposes the bump out of the existing Tisdall, which now is a flat building, and we've simply taken the pediment, the peak, and the addition to the right and simulated what's existing and then stretched it forward north towards Concord.
Can you just point to the board where the addition is on this?
Yeah, let me go to this one.
Yeah.
So if I may, this is the existing Tisdall Hall, and this flat wall goes all the way through to the east. And we're proposing this little bump out is really copying the existing conditions and just pushing it forward. So the existing Tisdall has this peak, the existing window, but it's flat and flush, so the existing Tisdall wall facing north is a straight wall, which is making the projection forward and copying the ridge, copying the windows, copying all of the brick details and masonry cornices, to really make it less of a statement, and at the end of the day, it'll look like what's always been there, just have that entrance and elevated tower as needed. Around the back, it is a flat roof building, so we are taking, some of the freedom of what's already existing on the back of Tisdall, and really to give Ashland something much more residential, putting a little gabled pediment tower on top of the stage to really soften up this whole corner of Ashland, Ashland Road. Again, the same bricks, the same detailing that's currently existing, we're just gonna continue that and wrap the new building shell.
So is this visible off of Ashland?
It is, but this
So
is a view
this is the
from,
view?
this view is from Ashland.
Okay.
But everything that's peaked and forward is new conditions, but it's all matching the existing conditions of the existing Tisdall.
Is there a view from Manor Hill Road?
I do not have a view from that.
Well, this is, the side would be what Manor Hill would see, but there is, landscaping, and the landscape architect will describe the
Right.
proposed landscaping in that area.
So this almost is a view from Manor Hill, but the story for this photograph slide is all of the existing wall design is copied and was rebuilt further south of the building. So the details are just what's existing, it's sort of rebuilt and moved forward to the south.
And can you just go through the variances for this part of the project?
Yes. This is one of those height variances, again, referencing the average grade, that's asking for a height variance of an existing condition. The existing peak on Tisdall is at 39.7, I believe. 37.4 feet. That's an existing height reference from average grade. And all we're doing is simply taking that pediment, moving it north, and keeping the ridge height the way it is. But unfortunately, because it's an existing non-conforming, it's asked for the variance to keep it and rebuild it. That's the variance on Tisdall Hall. At the same time, it's been referenced from the environmental commission to every south-facing roof try to entertain solar panels. We have no south-facing sloped roofs, but the conversation is continuing to do a flat roof solar panel on top of Tisdall. More information is needed, but that conversation is still alive and well, and we need to get further into the process.
And I do believe that there's also a story variance for this because the basement is technically considered a story above grade. So even though it looks 2 stories, technically under the ordinance, it's 3 stories. So it's just another variance that is being requested.
Do you have a picture of the current north side, the side that faces Conley Hall?
No, but I guess I've taken liberty because from this slide, just to see, slides, the existing Conley Hall is almost this view, but imagine this architecture has been flat.
Right.
So we've taken that corner pediment and just pulled it, extruded out of the mass and called it an addition. So if that verbal description helps, that's the existing tizzle, it's just a flat four-sided box. We're gonna articulate it and make it a little more user-friendly. That help?
Perfect. Yep.
Upper
Um,
Connolly?
We're going there now.
Again, this is the last slide, and then, we're gonna end with Upper Connolly. We're almost done. Upper Connolly, again, it's still part of Connolly, because they don't connect upper to lower in the accessible route, we need to add a secondary elevated tower, as I previously described. And that's what's represented here. If we come off of Blackburn to the building to the right, you'll see this covered, sort of this elevated concrete terrace. That's where the new elevator lobby will be. And above that, we're elevating a second floor with stone columns again, because it is directly east of Grace Hall. So this diagram represents that program, a small elevated tower, elevator lobby on the lower level with the nose line of small, very slender classrooms above. Again, to free up some of those traditional classroom spaces to be repurposed for that flexible, multi-purpose use that the school desperately needs to be competitive. That's this floor plan diagram. As a little sketch, we did a little photo montage. As you come off of Blackburn, Connolly is to the right, and so you reference it as you peel away to the left, down to the parking lot and across from Grace Hall. And this is what the proposed addition will look like. To the right, you'll see new windows. We've kept all of the large existing window vernacular intact. All of the Connolly additions have the same large windows. But we've added this sort of peak element, again, very similar to the lower Connolly, to simulate more of a residential character, break up as much as possible that flat, massive roof expansion. We are topping the cornices, bringing in the stone, bringing in the simulated slate from Grace Hall, and making the whole campus much more responsive to its neighbors.
And this project also needs a story variance and height variance again because of the topography, because there's a story above grade that's calculated, even though when you look at it, it only looks like 2 stories.
Yeah, it's 2 stories, again, because of that average grade reference, and this diagram represents it, the point of referencing is almost a full story in the dirt below first floor. So from that measurement point, we are asking for a height variance, but again, it's, the height variance is still less than existing heights of Connolly. So it's a matter of semantics and definitions of how we present this to you tonight. And this diagram, I think, clearly represents, that reference line deep in the dirt, because I'm measuring to the ridge to give you that height. At 50, this was 52 feet 9 inches.
52.9 feet.
Which clearly it's not 52 feet tall. And then that leaves
Chair,
us.
can I ask a question just for my own clarification? So on the Conley additions, the upper, you're building 2 stories.
Yes,
And it's less, the roof line is less than the existing structure that's there that you're adding it to.
Correct. It's less than the existing as the building grows down the hill, the building becomes taller and taller.
Just
yeah.
Yes.
bear with
Yes.
me. On the lower portion, you're building 3 stories, but really 1 is a basement.
Correct.
Correct.
And that, again, the roof line that you're proposing is still below the existing structure.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that floor part of the overall square footage that you referenced, where you're 400 to 600 square feet over for that 16%?
No, that-
That would go towards floor area ratio,
Okay,
the one that's
So-
below.
it's not for building coverage,
Well, technically it is because you're still adding
that piece, right?
that
That's
piece,
still
yes.
bumping out beyond the
Correct,
existing
exactly,
footprint.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
And then I have one other question. How many existing classrooms are there, and how many are you net adding?
We're adding net new traditional classrooms of 5. But with that 5 net, that means we are allowed to repurpose other smaller classrooms to be multi-purpose, non-traditional teaching environments. So the total, right? Five total new net.
If you need to
Yes.
look it up and get back to us, that's just a question I'd like
Okay,
to answer.
perfect.
5 brand new, cold classrooms, frees up other classrooms to be repurposed and renamed.
And right now, how many stories is Connolly as it stands? It looks like,
It's a tough question.
because it's going to be 5 stories based on topography, based on one of the A10, I think it shows it as 5
Correct.
stories. So what is it
Technically,
now?
it's same, is it?
You did that diagram, and it wasn't even confusing for us to even put this out there. It is 5 levels, from the lowest point to the highest point,
Existing?
existing. So I'm sorry, 4 existing, the lowest innovation lab is the 5th floor.
Which is
The 5th floor
underground.
ladders. So existing, there are 4 levels, we're calling them levels inside of Connolly. The lowest level of the innovation lab on Lower Connolly is a new floor plate for Connolly. So the proposal would be turning 4 into 5.
Do any of the floor plates on Upper Connolly match the elevation of Lower Connolly, including the proposed addition?
No.
No,
That
so
theater
they're
cuts the building in
separate
half. So you have to
for
go
all intents
down
and
the
Right.
stairs, upstairs, through, so it's a little.
So they're not
dysfunctional.
continuous through one
No,
part of the
that
building?
theater really disrupts the flow.
Okay.
So this new peaked roof on Upper Conley Hall, we're looking at the front elevation on A5.
Yes.
What is the purpose of that? Just visual, or is there gonna be utilities in there, or storage, what's?
On Upper Connolly,
Yes.
the top floor is all,
The roof,
multi-purpose.
Peak roof.
the peak
The
roof, he's
the
asking.
roof area.
The peak roof is an aesthetic device to screen the mechanical unit behind it. It's probably larger than I need, but it's a device where I can kind of take all of the flat, if you know the Connolly building, it's very flat, kind of loosen it up a little bit so it has some relationship to Grace Hall, directly to the neighbor, and it gives the residents and the users of the building sort of a pleasant way of having a gateway bookend between the beautiful Grace Hall and,
But the peak doesn't turn the corner,
No,
therefore
it's just-
screen from,
it's just an
Screen Blackburn
isolated,
from-
it's just an isolated element floating on top of that new Connolly addition.
can you view those mechanical units from Blackburn?
No.
And I just want to point out, I believe the design guidelines also frown upon flat roofs, so trying to eliminate or disguise as many of them as possible.
No, I'm just thinking, such a high pitch.
If it's a recommendation to maybe take it down a little bit, of course, I mean,
I'm just throwing it out.
well, you're right on the line, because there's always a conversation about how tall is tall, how low is low. Grace Hall is, it's up there, so.
So what you're proposing, the design aesthetic, is to mirror that of the pitch for Grace Hall?
Yes.
Thank you.
How about we move on to signage?
Signage.
Which is always
Let's do it.
fun and exciting.
Signage, let's start with the easy one, Tisdall Hall. We are proposing to relocate those pin letters on Tisdall Hall and just move them up. By moving them up, that's a variance because it exceeds the height that the sign is allowed to appear, as well as the existing sign is larger than 8 square feet. So by default, the sign exists as an existing non-conforming. We're simply relocating it, but higher than the zoning allows, and that's one of the variances. On Upper Connolly, it's an existing, small, I think it's a 6-inch letter, black on a white colonial porch beam cornice. Once we make that building all brick, that sign is not gonna do it, so we're asking that sign to be a 10-inch letter, to be pin lit, pin mounted, and that size obviously is gonna be larger than the 8 square feet as well. But again, because of the block on top of the brick, it's gonna be a very subtle sign, almost non-detectable from Blackburn. It's almost a sign that has the users already are on campus. The big sign application we're asking for is Lower Connolly. Lower Connolly is internal, it's not visible from Ashland, it's not visible from Blackburn or from Wanted or from Prosper. And it is meant to really just self-advertise for the people already on the campus. It is calling for a crest, the logo of Oak Knoll, is calling for the words, Oak Knoll School of the Holy Child. And we also asked for another sign, which is a cross on top of the pediment, which is another sign, bigger than 8 square feet. So the big ask is Lower Connolly, it's all internal. Upper Connolly, we think it's warranted to ask for something a little bit bigger, that becomes less visible than what's existing. And then Tisdale, an existing sign non-conforming, we simply remounting those same height, raising it up, which causes the height variance, the vertical distance.
And are any of these signs illuminated?
No signs in there.
And would you say they're all consistent with existing site signage and needed for ease and identification?
Yes.
Perfect. And then, in terms of the coverage variances, is it your opinion that it would be difficult to perceive the additional mass or coverages of the buildings from any one spot on the campus, due to the fact that there's kind of an upper and lower campus?
Yes, that's a good point. It was mentioned earlier, and I should have re-emphasized that no part of this campus, you'll be able to detect all of the individual additions. When you're standing at Lower Connolly, you can't see Tisdale, you can't see Upper Connolly. Standing at Upper Connolly, you can't see Lower Connolly or Tisdale. So the spreading out of this ask, I think, is warranted to take advantage of the privacy that this campus has by default. So the neighbors won't see it. Inside the campus, outside of the campus, it's spread out and well hidden of the mass we're asking for.
And the topography obviously creates a challenge, and some of these additions are tucked behind other buildings that are on site. They will be shielded by proposed landscaping.
Yes.
And they were thoughtfully designed so they blend in better with a more residential feel
Exactly.
and
yes.
consistent with the design guidelines in Summit.
Yes.
Thank you.
Can we go back to the signage for a moment?
Yes.
You said, zoning allows 8 square feet, and you're going for 10.
8 square feet is what I read from the zoning ordinance. 8
Right,
square feet
so
max.
the nominal difference between 8 and 10, what's the need for that? What's the justification for that?
Well, I think when we proposed the 10, it was a conversation we had about scale and appropriateness for a simple black letter that has less contrast on a brick wall than a black letter on a white wall. So it was simply an aesthetic judgment to, I think that does work better for the building. Real estate was just an aesthetic call.
It makes the sign more easily visible.
Yes.
Visual.
Okay. And then the other one, I think it was Tisdale, you said you're raising it?
It currently exists right above the first floor door, right above the header of the door. We're raising it up to the second level. So it's going that higher than 12. I think it allows 12 without a variance to go much higher than the 12. So the height mounting is a variance as well as repeating the existing non-conforming.
And based on the new structure you're building, you really couldn't reduce it to that 12 foot?
Now, because we're proposing a canopy at that first floor to protect that door, and I think the building now, with this projection forward, aesthetically, would be better served with something higher.
Thank you.
And then just for the record, 72 Prospect Street, can you just confirm that that will remain as is with the residential look and feel that it is today, and there's no changes proposed to the exterior of that property?
That is correct.
I think you've already described the materials and the colors for the proposed improvements. Is there any building lighting that's being proposed?
We have, the only building lighting that we are talking about of exit lighting by code. So every exit door and entrance door would have a small light under the canopy or next to the door. It's not an aesthetic light, it's a light required by code. That's all we are dealing with right now for building lighting, is code required lighting.
And in terms of the administrative comments, I believe you addressed the solar panels from the Environmental Commission. Did you review the construction officials' comments, and does the applicant agree to comply with them as a condition of approval?
Yes.
Perfect. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you. Questions from our board experts for this witness?
I do not have anything for this witness.
I guess I have one, Mr. Chairman. Would it be accurate, talking about signage, would it be accurate to describe the proposed signage as wayfinding signage on site as opposed to what a typical business might have for signage?
Correct. Because it outlines which building, you know, the names of each building, so it helps identify each building.
I think it's a very good argument to call it a wayfinding project, but at the same time, it was done for more of a pride of place. So if we go down the path of pride of place, pride of buildings, it is a wayfinding.
I'm not sure I'm not sure those two concepts are in conflict.
Right, I agree.
And so these signs, just to go on that wayfinding thing, these signs aren't designed to draw attention to the site from outside the site.
They will not be seen outside of the site.
I think that's the only question I had, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for this witness from the board?
I just have a couple. Sorry about that. Fire suppression, all buildings are sprinklered?
All the new additions will be sprinkled. There are some existing spaces that are not sprinkled. For the record, everything new would be sprinkled.
And will the connections be on the building, remote, close to the street? Has that been looked at?
I don't have that answer. Whatever local, state requirements are, that's what will be there.
That just makes me wonder, if you're putting in sprinklers, let's say in Lower and Upper Connolly, have you explored the possibility of putting sprinklers in the rest of the building once you're doing this kind of giant infrastructure project? I mean,
That was day one, getting the building up to code first and then expanding footprint second. So it's a conversation that's not resolved.
okay.
To sprinkle an existing building, there's some logistics and so many moving parts currently with this proposal. It's still a live conversation. I think it will happen. When it happens, we don't know. But we recognize it is needed and it will happen.
And then one more question about the signage. So, you know, I see one of them is like 11.4 square feet, 11.25 square feet. Would you, and when looking at the signage, given the size of the buildings, right? Sometimes you look at perspective. Would you say that the size and the location, like the height, is in keeping with sort of the scale of the building, right? Where if you made the sign smaller, it might be just lost in a building that size? Is that part of the reason
Well-
for the choice and size?
I'll say yes.
You're exactly right on, because we measure the sign after we visually place it. So after we visually are happy with the look, then we measure it. So we don't, so the aesthetic comes first, the measuring comes second. And we found ourselves, we can't do 8, so we're here tonight asking for more.
Any additional questions?
I have a question about the signage. Yeah, I was saying it's basically so that you know which building you're at. So the Lower Connolly Hall, the sign on Lower Connolly Hall says Oaknall, but doesn't say Connolly Hall. Like, how do you know that that's Connolly Hall if you're coming from, say, the Ashland area? Because the Upper Connolly says Connolly Hall, Tisdale says Tisdale Hall, but then Lower Connolly says Oaknall.
Well, Upper Connolly Hall is a point of entry for the campus and the school, for parents, visitors. That's also the theater building, the Campion Theater Center inside Collins. So we felt that was important because that's sort of the point of entry into the campus, that was important. The Lower Connolly, is more of, you're already in the building, and that, parking lot is used as a secondary playground. So again, it's a pride of place to celebrate the building, not so much for people outside of the campus. So it's sort of,
I think that most people know it's one building, so it just has the one sign on the upper Connolly.
And there's no entry facing that parking lot / playground,
no,
correct?
you have to come in off Ashland, go straight, you make a right. And, you know, in all of the size that we're asking for Lower Connolly, you know, we're not gonna kid ourselves that that would ever be approved for Upper Connolly, because it is a lot. So keeping it a little aggressive, but appropriate, Lower Connolly fitting, for internal view.
And those signs are blocked by Bonaventura,
Correct.
right? So you wouldn't see them from the street.
Any other questions?
I do. Bear with me for 1 second. Tisdale Hall, second floor, over the proposed, I wish I had my glasses, I can't read it. I guess it's the flexible physical ed room?
The
So
multi,
it would
the
do
multi-purpose,
yeah.
right?
So on this proposed second floor, there's a squared in area, you know, at the lower bottom, what is that?
That's the top of the stage. The stage is a high volume, that's like the proscenium,
So that's a open all the way up?
open all the way
That's-
up. It's, you know, if there's ever scenery that needs height, it's just a volume that goes up.
Perfect.
Okay. I think we're done with board questions. We will now open it up to the public. Remember, questions only for this witness. Same rules as first time, please state your name, spell your last name, and give your address.
My name's Eric Nicely, Ericnicely. I live at 56 Blackburn Road. My question is, putting these structures in place, have you looked at the size of the footings and whether or not you need to drill or blast to be able to get the supports in that area? Because we are all on bedrock and we seem to shake a little bit when that happens, or have you got that far?
We have not gotten that far.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Hi, Brad Olson, 64 Blackbird Road. I have 2 questions. First, do you mind bringing up the first overall map that
Site
you
plan?
had? Yeah. That was great. Oh, yeah. That one. So it looks like with respect to most of the additions, or at least 1 and 3, as you have labeled there, you have them on sort of the interior of the property. With respect to Tisdale Hall, you're going out closer to neighbors. Have you considered options to locate that on the interior of the property, so you don't impact neighbors on Manor Hill and Blackbird?
Funny you should mention that. Yes, we did, but the burden of deficient parking quickly took that off the table. We did try to keep everything internal as much as possible. That would really be a parking circulation.
Even with, you still have green space within the interior of your property that you could consider.
Let me just walk up to them. Walk and answer this. Existing Bonaventura is right here, the lower school. We're proposing the orange box moves to the north here.
I could propose a number of different things.
Is that-
I don't think that's what you want me to do with my Q&A. I'm just
No, I'm just saying,
suggesting
we
that
did look at it.
it doesn't, I'm not, okay,
We did look at it. It proved not to be viable.
okay.
I think also the nature of the space needs to relate to the other functions that are in Tisdale. That's why it was located or attached to that building.
How much of the Tisdale addition adds to your lot coverage variance?
Lot coverage variance is, it's over now, we're asking for 46%, 6% higher. That delta is like 27,000 square feet. Tisdall is not the only reason. It's all of the buildings, all of the floors, all of the.
What contribution does Tisdale make to that 6%?
I don't know.
And there will be testimony about landscape screening that's going along that perimeter.
By the Tisdale addition.
Correct, yes.
I just have a question as background. When I read the 1991 resolution for the original build of Tisdale, it referenced an R15 of 35% lot coverage, and they needed, I think at the time, 41%. Why is now the bogey 40%?
That is the conditional use standard in the ordinance.
Has it changed, or?
It could
Maybe
have,
I
it
misread
could have,
the
it could have
1991.
changed since 1991,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, second question.
And just to be clear, the standard for the R15 zone and conditional uses are different. A school is a conditional use, so it has to meet different standards than what another property would have to meet in the R15 zone.
My property at 64 Blackburn needs to meet
Because it's
35%,
residential, right.
and
The
I'm
school
within
is a
that
conditional,
35%.
right, yeah. So it's different.
Second question, line of questioning is along the parking. So on lot 5, or number 5.
Number
yeah,
5.
Number 5. You're adding parking to, I think, 76 Prospect?
I think that's for another.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll save it.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the public for this witness?
Hello, my name is Karen Nicely, K-A-R-E-N-N-I-C-E-L-Y. I live at 56 Blackburn Road. I have a question for you. You mentioned many times that you can't see this, you can't see that, when you're standing on Blackburn Road or Ashland Road. Yet, I would venture to say everybody who's got a home here, who is concerned about Oak Knoll, does not reside on the road. Even if you're on the opposite side of Blackburn Road, the second floor.
Do you have a question, ma'am?
Yes, my question is, have you used a drone or anything else to actually get a visual what the neighbors will see out their windows?
No.
Okay. And mine is just a second, with regards to the drilling. You haven't done anything with
No.
regards to the drilling yet. You're gonna go down into the ground and we sit on boulders.
We haven't done any kind of foundation design yet.
Okay, thank you.
Can I follow up with that question about the substructure is, when some of the other buildings like Tisdale Hall were built, what did you encounter in those areas? I mean, you must have information on that from that construction.
Well, we have existing condition rock elevations and water table elevations. We have not designed the foundation systems yet.
But you have a geotech report.
We have a
that tells you.
geotech report, but we don't have any foundation designs.
When was Tisdale built?
I think in the mid-70s.
What was the last structure to be built on the campus? And when?
Tisdale Hall,
That was the last one?
yes.
Okay.
Oh, 90s?
Was it 91, 91?
91.
Yeah.
It looks like the
It is getting a little late in the night.
90s. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenberg.
Thank you.
Hillary, I'm gonna propose a 5-minute break.
Sure.
And then hopefully get through one more witness tonight.
Sounds good. It'll be the civil engineer.
Great, perfect, thank you. What's that? If everyone could return to their seats, please.
Say, just make sure Ms. Olds knows that.
That was almost a 5-minute break for a 5-minute break. That's outrageous.
This is a good map.
Look at all these 15
We have returned from our break.
How many trees did we kill?
Hillary, are you introducing a new exhibit?
Yes, there's
Okay.
going to be a rendered site plan, which would be A2.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Your next witness, please.
Sure. Just your last name.
Chanel.
Chanel. Okay, Dan Chanel.
Please state your name for the record, please.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the board. My name is Daniel Chanal. Last name is Sehnal. I am a principal of the firm Dynamic Engineering, located at 245 Main Street, Chester, New Jersey.
Can you please raise your right hand? You swear affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And can you just please give your qualifications?
Absolutely. I am a graduate of the New Jersey Institute of Technology, where I've earned a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering. I have over a decade of experience in preparation of various commercial, residential, and industrial site plans throughout the region. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey, as well as several other states where my license is valid and in good standing. And I've testified well over 200 times before various boards, including this board that I'm in front of tonight.
Would the board like to accept the qualifications?
We will.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're having some technical difficulties, so
Yeah,
we might have to
over here is not working.
plug it in up
Oh,
here.
all right.
So if you want to sit over here and if
No, that's all right.
Stand
I
up
can,
there,
I can
whatever.
probably drive at the same time and
Okay.
talk.
And just while she's doing that, can you just explain the steps you took to prepare for your testimony tonight?
Absolutely. I was essentially tasked, along with my staff, to evaluate the existing conditions of the site, work with the architectural team to essentially evaluate the locations of the building additions, as well as look at the existing parking configuration, working with our traffic team to essentially incorporate both the building revisions or additions, as well as the existing parking issues, and work to essentially find somewhat of a solution and to help alleviate some of the problems that exist today.
And so recognizing that the site is fully developed with existing buildings, parking, and other improvements, did you prepare civil engineering plans in accordance with the requirements of applicable city ordinances and the municipal land use law?
I did.
And then I would just ask if you could go through those plans for the board.
I would love to. It looks like we're still having some technical issues showing.
You're getting cold too.
Yeah, I don't have to. Yeah, so just a regulation, I should work.
Sorry.
No worries.
Always a challenge.
Right. I don't know if this city has anyone who can assist.
What do you think the problem is? You think it's just the office?
Just not
Just
recognizing.
Not connecting
But it was before.
Do you have
Yeah,
it?
we had it on the break. It was
Thumb
fun.
drive to use the other computer?
yeah, do you have it so we can use the other computer?
I have it on a USB, so I
Okay.
can just plug it into the USB.
Yep, why don't we do that?
That works.
Perfect.
Can we steal your computer?
Well,
Hopefully,
Thanks.
Full when I started, so.
Sure you know what you're asking for. No, it's fickle. It's very fickle.
Who else has it? Battery's dead on this already?
You don't want suggestions on your new computer, you know?
You don't have to be fast.
I think I'm dead, Dan.
Which class?
Remember that?
All right, we'll just go old school and use some boards if that's.
Okay.
Was it really? Yeah. I think that's what it was.
How many computers does it take to get one exhibit up?
There's one more US, ATM board right there.
I said to other people to, they don't even around to just like.
For voting? Yeah.
Maybe right there.
Computer number 3.
Computer number 3, Lucky Charm?
That's for a license? Yeah.
That's the part I never did. When I had to drive on the,
Maybe it's
I'm
not.
not gonna have a license, doesn't mean I have to drive. Oh, wow. Here's the point.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. We have a backup plan.
This will work.
It's, you have a, you're on
Perfect.
the walk out. Oh, it's not. So where's the boat now?
I don't even try to do the other one anymore.
How do you get that? Where do you go? You have to go back. Wait, you're on. Go over the service.
We're back.
Okay.
All right. So where we left off, the exhibit that I have mounted on this board is essentially an aerial exhibit. This is sheet 2 within our site plan set. It is dated February 1st, 2024, last revised June 18th, 2024. And essentially, this is just an aerial image of the overall site. The site itself is bounded, essentially faded back and shaded a little bit, and bounded by the yellow line. I'm sure everyone is very familiar with the area, relatively residential in nature. The site itself is currently made up of 2 separate lots, as you heard this evening. The overall campus, which is lot 3, is about 9.8 acres, and then 72 Prospect, essentially at the very northeastern corner of the site, that makes up about 3/4 of an acre itself. So those 2 existing lots that ultimately we're looking to consolidate into a single lot, and that overall bounded area of the site comprised altogether about 10.6 acres. The site itself fronts on 4 separate roadways. You have Blackburn Avenue that is along the western side of, Blackburn Road. On the western portion of the property, that's a 2-way undivided roadway, which is under local jurisdiction. Right now, there's 2 driveways on that road. You have a ingress-only driveway, which is located opposite of Blackburn Place. Essentially, that is the main entrance to the upper portion of the school. And there is also an egress-only driveway. That's a little bit further north along that Blackburn Road frontage. That's an exit-only driveway. It's important to note that there is no parking permitted on either side of the road along Blackburn Road. Working in a clockwise direction, we have Prospect Street to the very north of the site, and that is where 76, which is Mulcahy Hall, as well as 72 Prospect Front. Both of those existing buildings are essentially residential in nature, and they both have their own driveways, both full movement access back out to Prospect Ave, or Prospect Street. Prospect Street also allows no parking permitted on either side of the street along the school's frontage. Working further along in a clockwise direction, we have Larned Road, which is the unimproved gravel roadway, 2-way, and there's only one existing driveway that's on that street for this subject site, which is a gravel access to that carriage house that's associated with the 72 Prospect. So that access only provides that driveway only provides access to those 4 parking spaces associated with the carriage house, and parking is permitted along Larned on the western portion of the property, which is essentially the side that Oak Knoll is located on, and there's also parking permitted on the eastern side, but essentially only 2-hour parking between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. And then finally, we have Ashland Road, which again is also under local jurisdiction. And there's one ingress-only driveway located at the eastern end of the frontage near the intersection of Larned. And then there's also a full movement driveway a little bit further down, which provides access to that lower portion of the school. Parking is permitted along the opposite side of the street from the school frontage, but only up to the crosswalk. There's no parking permitted past that crosswalk, and there's no parking permitted on the Oak Knoll side of the street. So you heard a lot about the existing conditions of the site. It's currently developed with 7 existing buildings. You have Tisdall Hall, Connolly Hall, Bonaventura Hall, Grace Hall, Mulcahy Hall, the 72 Prospect, the 72 Prospects Carriage House, and there's also a small shed that's located on the site. So all of those existing buildings as they stand today makes up about 58,000 square feet, which accounts for about 12.6% of the entire parcel, whereas 15% is permitted for building coverage. There's also paved internal circulation and parking areas throughout the site. There's enough delineated parking spaces, so marked and striped parking spaces, for 140 vehicles currently on the site, as it is today. There, as you heard earlier, there is a trash and essentially receiving area located to the rear of Connolly Hall, which is right up here to essentially the western corner of the site where the dumpsters are located and some of the receiving operations take place. There's concrete and asphalt walkways that connect the various areas of the campus. You have the turf athletic field along the eastern property line, and directly north of that you have a fenced-in paved area containing the 3 existing tennis courts. It's important to note that that turf athletic field is considered a pervious surface, meaning that water can get through it, and there is a drainage system underneath it that collects that water and conveys it off-site. These existing improvements make up about 4.4 acres of impervious surface coverage, which accounts for about 42% coverage of this entire site, whereas a maximum of 40% is permitted. So there's an existing nonconformity associated with both building coverage and lot coverage as just lot coverage as the site sits today. The site is very moderately graded, generally slopes from the northwest to the southeast, and the grade falls about 50 feet across the site. So from Blackburn Road down to Larned, it's about a 50-foot elevation change. Because of this, there's various steep slopes that are defined by the city ordinance that are disturbed. It's just essentially the nature of this site, because of the developed nature of the site, the location of the buildings, and how they're connected with one another. There's areas of both of paved area and grass area that exceeds the maximum slope, what would be considered a steep slope in the town. So essentially, whenever you disturb these steep slopes, it requires a variance because these steep slopes are meant to be undisturbed in order to essentially maintain the existing the drainage patterns, making sure that there's no erosion that takes place on site. So we will be seeking a little bit of a variance to disturb some of these steep slope areas, which I'll speak on shortly. There are existing stormwater management measures in place as it sits today. The majority of the stormwater that's generated by both the buildings and the parking area are collected by various inlets and roof leaders on the site. And most of the stormwater is actually discharged to Ashland Road, to the city's drainage networks within there. There is actually 2 existing subgrade detention systems that are located on the site. It does take some of the stormwater and detains it and releases at a slower rate. Those improvements were put back in I believe the early 90s or early 2000s with some other improvements, which helped some of the stormwater concerns back then, and those are still functioning today. The site is zoned as is within the R15 zone, where a institutional use is permitted, but this is a conditional use. And as Hillary had mentioned, when you have a conditional use within a zone, there's essentially additional zoning requirements that are essentially different from a standard use that would be permitted within that zone. So when we're working with a conditional use here, there's standards that essentially exceed or are different from the standard zone as a whole. And when we do not meet one of those conditions, it kicks us to the zoning board, which is why we're before you this evening to essentially seek a couple of those variances. Other than the lot coverage variance I mentioned earlier, there is several existing nonconformities on the site, which include the minimum front, rear, and side yard setbacks, maximum building height, buffer width, maximum lot coverage, as I mentioned, parking space size, driveway slope, and the location of some off-street parking.
I'm just gonna end the striping is also.
And the striping, yep, correct.
non-conforming,
So unless there's any condition or questions about the existing conditions of the site, I'll switch over to my rendering and discuss the proposed improvements. So
So
this
that-
exhibit would be a new exhibit, which I will mark A2 with today's date.
A2. That was a file, that was already filed before.
And what this is essentially a colorized version of the site plan that was submitted on behalf of this application, essentially overlaid onto an aerial image itself. So this is titled Site Plan Rendering, and it is dated January 9th, 2025. Again, just colorized version of the site plan. The orientation changed a little bit. Previously, north was to the top of the page. Now north is to the right-hand side of the page. We have Larned Road at the bottom of the page, Blackburn Road to the top, Prospect to the right-hand side, and Ashland further off to the left. So as I mentioned, as part of this project, there's two main objectives, essentially one of which is to consolidate lots 2 and 3. Lot 2 is at this very northeastern corner. Lot 3 is the rest of the site. So once that's consolidated, we'll have one overall lot consisting 10.6 acres. It's important to note that we're not touching Lot 2, that existing home. We're not making any changes to Lot 2, as you heard earlier tonight. However, because we are now consolidating this, making it part of overall Lot 3, we have essentially 2 new technical variances associated with the setbacks. So now that we're going to be a part of the school use, we now have 2 front yards associated with this, and we will be seeking a variance for the setback on Larned Road, which is a technical variance because of the zone and now consolidating to the single lot. And then the other objective, obviously, for this evening is seeking the approval for the additions to Connolly Hall, which is at the top portion of the page, centralized portion of the site, as well as Tisdall Hall, which is all the way to the southern end of the site. The additions are the darker orange shade, and the existing buildings are essentially those tan colors. The gray throughout the site is parking areas. Again, we have the existing turf field to the eastern portion of the site, and that tennis court directly to the north of that. As you heard, there's 4 main building additions throughout the site. And as a result of these building additions, we will be looking to increase the building coverage to 16%, whereas only the 15% is permitted. So we're going from that 12 and change up to 16% because of these new building additions. As far as setbacks, however, we are complying with the majority of the bulk standards for Tisdall Hall. We do understand that the addition would be essentially on the outside portion of the campus. However, that building addition does completely comply with the setbacks, both the side yard and the front yard. But we are seeking a setback variance for Lower Connolly. Essentially, the little portion of the building that juts out to the west will be closer to the property line than what permits, so that's a new variance. However, it's important to note that it's not closer to the property line than existing building currently is. So it's another technical variance just for that addition. Other than that, we do have the height variance and a buffer variance that we would be seeking that's associated with our above-ground stormwater basin all the way to the south that I will touch on a little bit further shortly. Additionally, as you heard, we are proposing some parking improvements. The main parking improvement is the surface lot that we're proposing behind 76 Prospect. This lot will contain 19 new parking spaces. However, we will be losing 3 parking spaces within that existing lot because of the new driveway that will essentially cut through the existing parking area and then enter the new parking field behind Mulcahy Hall. Additionally, there'll be a new driveway. It'll be an exit only that exits out to Blackburn Road, essentially providing another egress for those 19 parking spaces. And that essentially goes with the flow of the existing circulation patterns of the site itself. It's one-way circulation in this existing parking area. So in order to get to this parking area, you have to continue to follow that one-way flow of the existing parking area, enter that spaces for 19 cars, and then the only way out would then be back out to Blackburn. But again, only 19 parking spaces back there. It was essentially tested out in prior, this past year, and it seemed to be working well, and it helps alleviate some of the concerns, getting some additional cars off of the road. The parking spaces will be striped at 8.5 feet wide by 19 feet deep, which would require a design waiver. The city requires 9 feet by 18. However, throughout the existing site, all of the spaces are 8.5 by 19. And what that essentially accomplishes is you're able to get more parking spaces. You can basically get more bang for your buck. Since these parking spaces don't turn over often, it's not a retail use where people are coming in and out, making short trips. The width of the spaces isn't much of a concern. Just allows you to accommodate more vehicles, and those cars aren't moving often. So once you're parked in there, you're staying for a long time versus a use where you'd want to be circulating those cars and have a little bit more space. Also, those spaces will not be hairpin, meaning essentially 2 lines making up a single line in between the spaces. That's another city requirement. And essentially that's just going with the theme of the rest of the campus, which was previously approved to allow the 8.5 wide spaces as well as not providing hairpin spaces. That new egress out onto Blackburn Road will be paved. It will be lined with Belgian block curb, have all the stop signs. We did see your board engineer's comment about regrading the road to make sure no stormwater is entering the site, which we will absolutely comply with and make that happen. As far as parking requirements, when we're looking at educational institutions, the existing site requires 51 parking spaces. That is based upon the number and type of the classrooms within the school. And under proposed conditions, we are adding those 5 classrooms, as you heard, so that parking requirement would then go up to 64. So technically, by code, we are compliant with the number of parking spaces that we provide on site, with 140 existing and only 64 required under proposed conditions. The total parking on the site as it equates, there's 120 employee parking spaces, 16 student spaces, and then 4 that are essentially designated for parking for visitors. Once we make these improvements, we propose this additional parking lot on the site, as well as reorient a couple areas of the site, which would also include the 8 spaces behind 72 Prospect. We actually end up with 161 parking spaces on the site. So it's essentially a going from 140 to 161, which results in, I believe, a net gain of, 21 spaces?
Yes.
So that essentially removes 21 spaces that are currently used on the street and now brings them onto the campus, which helps alleviate some of the parking concerns on the streets surrounding the area. And you'll hear a little bit more from our traffic expert on the parking situation as well as the circulation of the site. Other site improvements, we are proposing a single electric vehicle charging space up by Tisdall Hall to comply with state standards of providing EV parking. We're also providing a new handicap accessible space that would comply with state requirements. As you heard, we are proposing some new site lighting associated with the new lot. That site lighting will be designed to essentially match the lighting that exists on site. There'll be 6 decorative style LED fixtures that will be full cutoff, dark sky compliant, and again, match the theme of the existing site. We are seeking a little bit of a variance because of light spill over the property line at the driveway that's going back out to Blackburn. The city code allows 0.1 foot candle. I know that's a technical term, but essentially that's a very low level of light. We are about 0.7 foot candles at the property line. Can we comply? We absolutely could. However, we prefer not to, just for a safety reason. Typically, driveways, you want to have a little bit more light, so if there's anybody walking on the sidewalk, vehicles exiting at nighttime would be able to identify somebody walking. Just makes it a little bit more of a safer condition. However, if members of the public or the board are concerned with that, if we can make that compliant, we definitely could. Finally, these improvements that we're seeking will result in about 18,500 square feet of new impervious surface coverage, which is about 0.4 acres. This would go up by about 4% when we're looking at a coverage as a whole to 46%. So we're going to 42% impervious surface coverage up to 46. To mitigate the increase of stormwater generated by the new impervious surface coverage, we are proposing an above-ground stormwater detention basin at the southern corner of the site, as well as two subsurface detention basins, which would be comprised of pervious pavement, meaning that stormwater can enter through the pavement itself and be held back and released at a slower rate, which I'll touch on a little bit shortly. And then finally, with these new improvements, we are providing a very nice, robust landscaping design, essentially focusing on the areas of the new improvements, as well as improving the existing buffer along Larned Road, as well as buffering the new parking area. And our landscape architect will provide detailed testimony on that. Site grading essentially was matched to maintain the existing conditions throughout that site. As I mentioned earlier, because of these new building additions, and work being done in areas that are already steep, since we'll be disturbing these steep slope areas, we are essentially seeking a variance to disturb the steep slope areas. I believe the square footage is 6,277 square feet precisely of steep slopes that would be essentially disturbed for this construction. But the site is going to be designed to make sure we're not causing erosion. There will be protective measures put in place during construction to make sure that there's not excessive erosion from these steep slope areas, and then they'll be fully stabilized following the conclusion of construction to make sure that there will be no issues in the future with erosion. So I think granting that variances would be warranted with the measures that we would put into place. Now with the most important part that everyone would love to hear about, I'm sure, is stormwater management. We are aware that there's concerns in the area with the existing stormwater conditions, especially with the stream that is located east of the site. So as I mentioned earlier, there is various stormwater control measures already on site, which collects the stormwater. Some of it is detained and then released primarily to inlets that are located on Ashland Road and then conveyed further downstream. Under proposed conditions, we are implementing 3 stormwater management basins. And essentially the intent of those basins is to provide stormwater quantity, quality measures before the stormwater leaves its site itself. This is what's considered a major development when we look at state stormwater requirements as well as city stormwater requirements. And what are major development? All that means is essentially is whenever we're disturbing more than an acre of land, or if we're increasing impervious surface coverage by more than 1/4 of an acre, we are required by state code to essentially meet that stormwater quantity and quality reductions. In order to accomplish this, we have what is considered a bioretention basin. Essentially, a bioretention basin is a basin with plants in it. And what that's going to do, it's going to collect stormwater that's generated by the Tisdall Hall roof. Essentially, the water that lands on the roof is going to be collected by roof leaders and then discharged directly into that basin, as well as some of the open space areas that are located directly to the west of that basin will just flow down the hill and essentially get trapped in this stormwater detention pond, and it will be essentially detained and released at a slower rate. What's important to note is since there's no pavement or parking area proposed up there, all of that stormwater is considered clean. Anything that a vehicle drives on is considered dirty, and we have to treat it for water quality. However, we are going above and beyond in this case by proposing a bioretention basin which provides water quality measures as well. Since there's plantings in there, it gives the water essentially the opportunity to percolate through the soil and be collected by an under drain before it is discharged off site. So that water is cleaned, and right there it's going above and beyond what's required for this area of the site. The next basin is essentially located between Lower Connolly and Bonaventura. hall. It is located within the existing parking area between those two buildings. What we're proposing there is what's known as a pervious pavement basin. Essentially, we'll be ripping up part of the asphalt and replacing it with pavement, special pavement that allows water to seep through it and enter a large stone storage area below that pavement. That accomplishes two things as well. One, you have the water quantity reductions there because you're storing the water and you're releasing it slower off-site. And then the pavement itself essentially acts as a way to clean the water before it leaves the site. Since we are, again, since this isn't any new vehicle surface that we're proposing, we technically don't need to treat for water quality because the building addition that is essentially draining to that basin, again, is considered clean water by state standards. We're, again, going above and beyond what's required. By now, we're adding a element of water quality to that existing parking area. So that parking area right now is considered dirty water. Right now, we're going to add that basin, allow the water to percolate through the basin, clean that water, and then release it off-site once it has a time, at a further time, essentially, again, back down towards Ashland. And then finally, sticking with the same theme, the new parking area behind 76 will essentially be comprised of the same thing. It's going to be pervious pavement that has the ability to collect the stormwater that's generated by that new parking area. Again, it will be cleaned by percolating through that pervious pavement and then discharged at a slower rate. You keep hearing me mention rates. So yes, additional stormwater or additional pervious area generates a higher volume of stormwater, but when we're looking at stormwater management, we don't look at volume, we look at rates. So the way I kind of like to think of it is almost like looking at a big stadium and almost a reverse situation of what happens to a stadium during a big sporting event. When everybody wants to leave at the end of the game, everyone leaves at the same time, it takes a while to get out of your seat, kind of work through all the concourses and exit the building. Essentially, that's the same thing as a flooding condition. You have the same amount of people in the stadium no matter what. You have the same, but when they are all trying to leave at once, it causes a backup, and in this case, it would be kind of like causing flooding. In this case, when you have no stormwater controls, that higher volume of water rushes off the site, and it causes flooding problems downstream. However, going back and looking at the stadium, before the game starts, everyone kind of goes in slowly over time, get there late, so there's no problems kind of getting to your seat. That would be the same thing essentially as a proposed conditions of the stormwater management system. You still have the same amount of stormwater falling on site and trying to leave. However, now it's being held back and it's released at a slower rate through our detention system, which allows to essentially alleviate downstream flooding issues by letting water out at a slower pace than it is under essentially proposed conditions with no basins whatsoever. So we're going above and beyond by providing additional levels of water quality as well as now detaining additional water in the existing parking area before it allows it to leave the site. So under proposed conditions, even though we're adding additional impervious surface coverage, it does actually help any type of flooding concerns as we're now holding this water back on our site and we're releasing it a lot slower to essentially allow the stormwater systems downstream to catch up as we release this water from the site. I wanted to touch on anything else. As far as utilities, all of these buildings are obviously serviced by existing utilities. There will be no major utility upgrades to service these buildings. Outside agencies, we have already submitted to the Union County Planning Board where we've received our approval, and we've also submitted to the Somerset Union Soil Conservation District, who essentially looks at the site under construction to make sure we're not allowing soil to leave the site from stormwater runoff, and they have granted their approval as well. So Hillary, unless I missed anything in my direct, I tried to go as quick as I could.
That's good. No,
I'm more than happy to address anything I missed. If not, I'm available for questions.
So I just wanted to ask one more question
Sure.
about, did you have a chance to review the engineer's report? And can you provide any comments on that if you haven't already touched on those comments?
Yes, I have. I had an opportunity to review the board's professionals report. And honestly, from a site engineering perspective, there was nothing in there that we felt we couldn't address. It was all technical in nature, a lot of stormwater-related items, but nothing that was earth-shattering or issues addressing.
So the applicant, as a condition of approval, can comply with everything
Absolutely.
in that report?
All right, So with that, we'll turn it over to our board professionals and see if they have any questions for this witness.
So I do have to agree that there's a whole lot of stormwater comments that I have in my letter, but they are very technical in nature, and I don't feel that they're anything that can't be complied with. So, you know, it would be something that would just be in a resolution compliance, that I think the applicant would be able to just correct some things that we found in there, and if not, we can work together to find some resolutions. I didn't see anything in there that was, that was gonna be a showstopper.
Okay.
Other than that, I think you addressed the striping for the parking stalls. Do you feel that there's any sight distance problems over on Blackburn Road with the exit from the new parking lot?
I do not. I know that we didn't show a site triangle. I'm more than happy to show that. But essentially, so since we are on the outside portion of the curve, you get a good view of what's coming down Blackburn. And I feel you could see what is making a left-hand turn from Prospect. But we'll absolutely show that site triangle, make sure nothing blocks the view.
Would your traffic expert be talking about maybe some directional signage inside?
He can, but I did see that a comment as well. I'm more than happy to essentially work with you to place some directional signage throughout the site to make sure we're flowing in the directions that would be enforced.
Right, I think the only change to some of the flow on site would be to that new parking lot and ensuring that that's an exit only.
Correct.
So, so I think we could work to make sure that was
Agreed.
accommodated. You mentioned the allowable light levels at the exit, and that does make sense to have some light spillage at that area. I think it is a safety concern, especially when you have a crosswalk there, sidewalk going across that exit. And I think that was all that I had that I wanted to point out.
Great, thank you. Steve, do you have anything for this witness?
I don't, Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
no.
Great. So let's open it up to the board. Do you have any questions?
I do, yes. For the proposed parking behind 76 Prospect, did you consider a way to incorporate it with that parking better with the existing parking so that there is no need for an additional exit onto Blackburn? Because I know that there's a new four-way stop sign, which is kind of close to that corner right there. So there is cars that back up. I'm an avid walker. I walk on Blackburn almost every day. And there is, between the driveway entrance in and out, that alone is tough to navigate. So to add another exit, have you considered that, the pedestrian traffic also along there?
Yeah, we did, and we absolutely took a look at essentially trying to utilize the existing exits. But there is existing, essentially clockwise flow around that existing parking area. And to try to get vehicles from this parking area to go essentially back into that parking area and then continue in a clockwise manner, we felt it would have been difficult to enforce. People would essentially be trying to go against the flow to get out of that existing driveway on Blackburn, which is why we really wanted to introduce essentially another way out from this main parking area. And it's only 19 cars. It's mainly going to be faculty that would be parking back there. And we're looking at those cars. You're not going to see anybody going in from that entrance in the morning. The majority of the people are going to be parked there all day long, and then it's just that one portion in the afternoon where the majority of the people would be leaving. So essentially one movement that's really taking place at one part of the day that we're anticipating. And with only the 19 vehicles there, we didn't anticipate too much of a concern. We really just wanted to try to avoid any internal conflicts as much as we could with that one-way circulation around the existing parking area.
So, and if I could just interject, I know the traffic engineer will speak about this more, but I believe the employees that will be parking back there have a more staggered time frame, so it won't be like 19 cars are leaving all at one time.
And I have one more question.
Sure.
On the lower, actually, okay. On the corner of Ashland and Manor Hill, there's a house there. Is that owned by Oakno?
No.
Even though there's like, the fence looks like it doesn't look like there's like, it looks like the
It's not
Backyard
technically owned by Oaknall School
Okay.
of the Holy Child, no.
thank you.
I have a couple of questions. So, first, for the stormwater management, we're looking at, is it about 4,300 feet of impervious cover at square feet, or how much?
I think it was 43,000.
43,000
So just
added-
under half an acre.
It just added, okay, so can you tell everybody on the board how many gallons of stormwater that is for a 3-inch storm, just for perspective?
I'm not sure of that calculation off the top of my head because we look at, again, it's rates that we're looking at.
Also, but it's
not-
it's
not
about
volume.
like 80,000 gallons, right? 8 gallons per cubic
Yeah.
foot. So that's a lot of water, and I mention that because wondering if you have done soils testing in the areas where you're talking about, the basins sound like a great idea. I love managing on-site, but a lot of Summit is clay. I don't know, under the parking lot, have you done soil
We
boring?
have.
All those places, so all
Yeah,
these
absolutely.
are suitable
So
for
one of the-
what you're.
So I know I mentioned quantity and quality as two main things that we're looking to address with stormwater management. The other one that the state requires is groundwater recharge. Essentially, if you are preventing water from going back in the ground, when you pave it, you have to make sure that water gets back into the ground. However, in a case with a site like this, we did stormwater testing. We went and looked at the existing soil conditions below where these basins would be. And like you mentioned, we encountered a lot of weathered rock, a lot of clay conditions, and we did permeability testing on those soils, and they are not soils that essentially allow stormwater to get back into the ground. The rates are extremely low, less than essentially 0.2 of an inch in an hour. So under existing conditions, no water is really getting into the ground. So under proposed conditions, even though with those basins proposed, the water won't be getting back into the ground either, which is why we're looking strictly here at detention. It's holding the water back for as long as we can and releasing it at a slower rate to alleviate the issues with capacity downstream of the site.
Okay, so even the detention basin here is not by Tisdale Hall, that's not just percolating,
Correct.
There's discharge pipe and it's just slowly discharging?
It still goes through the soil to get filtered, but then there's a pipe beneath that soil that then collects that water again and discharges it off-site.
Okay, and then second question, separate, but given the parking, stress on parking, I understand that you're exceeding the parking requirement, but you're under your parking need, right? So I think that's really what we have to be talking about, what the need. It doesn't matter that you exceed the requirement if you have, lots of people parking off-site. So just looking, I don't know, I didn't notice it really when I was looking at the other plan, maybe it was the color of this or something, but where you're adding the 19 parking spaces, assuming that Lot 2 would be incorporated, there is this space between the carriage house and the parking lot, right? The 19-space parking lot. Have you considered adding, it looks like you could probably get another 10 parking spots there if you extended towards the carriage house?
We did, but there's a significant grade change there, which is what essentially eliminates or impacts our ability to park that. There's a wall that essentially wraps around by that existing walkway, and that grade change isn't conductive to allow us to extend that parking area.
Well, could you make that by the carriage house its own parking area so that the people who are in that building can park there? I mean, I'm just, trying to figure out
The
if
carriage
there's any place on site where
we
you can
did-
add parking.
We did delineate, so with this carriage house, now under existing conditions, it's being used as a residential use that the school's really not using. So with the carriage house, both the carriage house and the residential dwelling in front of it, we're actually gaining another 8 spaces there. So that's where we're getting that was additional, essentially 21 spots is between the 19 in the new parking area, the 8 from 72 Prospect, and then we're losing several throughout the site because of the improvements. The 3 that we lose for the new driveway, as well as one of the spaces that we lose for the new handicap parking, and then we lose 2 spaces between Bonaventura and Connolly. So we are incorporating as much as we can that carriage house where we do gain an additional 8 spaces that we don't have today. And we're pulling 21 spaces that are currently being used on the street to now bring them on site.
Yeah, it looks like there's room for maybe more parking there, that's all. On the, it's blue here, I actually don't know how heavily wooded that might be or something, if that's.
Do you know what the grade
prohibitive.
changes were in what she's talking about?
Not off the top of my head, probably about 6 feet.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something to consider. It definitely looks like a place where, and the reason why that would be probably a good place for parking is that nobody's gonna see it, right, from that part of Larned Road. You already have the carriage house hiding it.
I
Yeah.
think that Oak Knoll would be very happy and willing to add more parking on site. So if that's a spot that the engineers think that we can add more parking, we'll certainly look at that.
You already have an existing curb cut on Prospect. Why not connect that driveway to the new parking lot and forego this troubling additional curb cut on Blackburn?
Well, I think we discussed this, previously with
So I'm
neighbors.
just gonna jump in. I believe one of the conditions of the prior approval was that they were not allowed to
Okay.
use that driveway. That's,
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a couple. And maybe you're not the perfect guy for this question, but I'll ask you anyway. I don't know what your school pickup and drop-off stuff is there, but if the front of if Blackburn Road is used as a drop-off and parents come down to the site, drop their kids off, and then drive out the existing exit, will that new curb cut become an additional, I can shortcut this way to get to the stop sign quicker, or is there gonna be some provisions to not allow that to happen?
My assumption, I don't want to speak for management, is security probably would not allow that. It would maintain the existing conditions unless, maybe the existing driveway is utilized or closed off to push people more to that. But I believe the intent is to keep the pickup, drop-off exactly how it is as
Because
today.
the new curb cut is directly across from the neighbor across the street. So I'm a little worried about their,
Yeah, I think security would most likely prevent that from allowing
Okay.
that to happen.
they'll make sure that there's a
Okay.
security officer there.
and then you spoke about the lighting, the overflow of the light at the new curb cut.
Yep.
Does that happen anywhere else on site, or will it just be that site? So, and if not, why is this site more important than the other sites?
Yeah, no,
Or
that's a
vice
great
versa?
question. That's a great question. We did do an existing light level study throughout the site, so we walked the site with a light meter to determine some of the light levels. There was areas that was real minor with light spill, so existing driveway that is the two-way driveway on Ashland. There's a light pole that's essentially right on the property line. You get a good amount of spill there, but that's accomplishing the same thing. It's a sidewalk that you want to make sure you're providing light for. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure if any of the other driveways exceeded, but more than happy to take a look for
Hey,
it.
that
It's just a
can-
general engineering practice that we try to incorporate just for safety, but again, it's something that we could comply with if it was necessary.
Because right now, again, the neighbor across the street may be subject to that
Understood.
overflow of light, and I'm kind of concerned about that.
Yeah, there is a street light that is probably, I would say, a couple, maybe 200 feet that's up the street. Those are Cobra heads, the typical street lighting, and those will be significantly brighter than anything we propose here. So in relation to existing street lighting, I don't think you would see much of an impact. We're talking 0.7 foot candles, which what a foot candle technically is the amount of light that a single foot candle or a single candle puts off from 1 foot away. So you can see it's very dim.
And as far as access throughout the complex, again, maybe this might be the traffic guy, but you're the civil engineer, emergency vehicle access. Is any of this changing right now that will hinder the response to your best of your knowledge?
No, to my knowledge, the circulation of the site is going to stay the same. There's no issues today, and we don't anticipate any new issues.
Okay, thanks.
I have another question. Do you know the distance, it might be on here, I just can't read, small red, from the new curb cut on Blackburn, the distance from there to the crosswalk on Prospect and Blackburn? Where the stop sign is, do you
Yeah,
know? The stop sign line.
About 115 feet, 120 feet.
Okay.
And there's a code minimum, right?
I believe it's 50 feet, but I'd
Yes.
defer to my traffic engineer.
50 feet. Jay, Tom? Nothing?
Yeah, where did you guys do your perk tests? Because this is obviously a pretty dynamic site. We do, the architect testified to that.
Yep.
So where were the perk tests done? And did you find any conditions that were different throughout the site?
I mean, conditions vary slightly from test pit to test pit, but we did test in each of the proposed basin locations, and the results were all what the state would consider substandard for allowing permeability back into the soil.
Okay. You also mentioned that this is, based on the amount of impervious surface that you're adding, it's a different standard than the normal, or you kind of insinuated that. If the standard is, 1-to-1, the impervious surface that you're creating, are you addressing the 1-to-1 standard, or are you going beyond that and capturing more capacity?
I think I understand. So you're basically saying, are we going above and beyond what essentially major stormwater requirements require?
In terms of capacity, yes.
Yes. I can tell you that we're absolutely meeting what's required by the city, the state, and the county. I don't know my exact numbers without looking at them, but I do believe we exceed the minimum allowable discharge rates, or essentially the maximum. So we are letting, we're holding back more water than technically we would be permitted to let go. So we are exceeding the standards. Correct. Required.
It'd be helpful if you know by how much you're
Yeah.
exceeding that requirement.
Absolutely.
You can get back to us, you don't need to do it right now.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I have my charts. If I can decipher them real quick, I might be able to spit out a really quick answer for you.
While you're looking that up, we can,
I have one more.
And I have one more too, yeah. You can-
I think we didn't look at the stormwater drawings, like the drainage, but it looked like, and I don't know if this was like sort of pipe underground, but it looked like there's an area sort of where a lot of flow goes down to Larned, like maybe it was around where the tennis courts are or something, that's a discharge point. It doesn't, I mean, Larned floods sometimes, right? And then you have conditions like we have right now where it's freezing and you're having like young people drive in these, swampy roads or icy roads. Like, has there been any look at addressing that discharge point to try to alleviate the issues on Larned Road, especially since you are using it for parking and for students?
Understood. Yeah, I mean, we even thought about the potential of adding inlets along Larned, which would essentially result in the need to pave the road, which I believe a lot of the city's not really for. They would like to keep it unimproved. It really, forces essentially slower travel. But we also took a look at the site and what our site drains to Larned. The site does generally slope in that direction. A large area of what looks like it could get to the road would be the turf field. However, that turf field is essentially pervious, and there is a drainage system below it that captures the water that falls on it and then discharges it to the corner of Ashland and Larned. And then the tennis facility, it actually is bordered by a stone trench that has a perforated pipe within it. The intent of that pipe is essentially to capture the surface runoff from the tennis court, collect it in that stone pipe, and then again convey it to the same location on Ashland. So the intent is that a very small amount of the water that is generated by Oak Knoll actually makes its way to Larned. It's either connected by or collected by the existing infrastructure within the parking areas, the subgrade collection system within the pervious field, or that stone trench adjacent to the tennis facility. Could there be some maintenance potentially done to that stone swale to make sure it's collecting that water like it should? Absolutely, more than happy to take a look at that. But we did take a really close look at that, as we knew how much of a concern that was for the neighbors. And in our opinion is that this site really is not discharging much water directly to Larned Road.
So, when were those, I mean, I used to live around the corner, and I walk there all the time. It's been a few years,
Yep.
so I'm just, when were those improvements made? Because I do, my memory of it is that the road got a lot of water, and the source of the water, a lot of the water is obviously coming from the uphill, right? That's water goes downhill, and the only uphill location is Oak Knoll School. So maybe those improvements have been just in the last couple of years or something, or maybe something else should be done. I don't know, but I think it's,
Yeah, again, the turf field did have drainage installed below it. And then I know just from historic site plans that we have about the stone trench and the perforated pipe that surrounds that tennis facility. So the intent is to collect that water and discharge it off. There's a small, slope area that exists between the sports facilities and Larned Road that slopes towards the road that doesn't have any type of stormwater infrastructure. But I really think a great amount of the ponding that you see along Larned is just from the unimproved nature of the road, the flat areas, and there's really no pitch to drain it to any type of stormwater infrastructure. The closest inlet on Larned is at the corner of Ashland, and then once you work your way down, I'm sorry that I'm not sure the names of the roads off the top of my head, but to the east there's some further stormwater infrastructure there. But without the correct pitch from a paved and improved right-of-way, that water kind of sits there. Again, more than happy to take a look at the existing infrastructure that is in place for the tennis facility and the field to make sure that it's been maintained and it's functioning the way it should. But as far as other improvements, there's really no other space to kind of place any type of basins or improvements that are along Larned Road. And certainly nothing that would be new generated from our proposed development.
And just, is there any stormwater management in the road right now?
No, there's not. There's no inlets. And,
The only way to do that would be to pave
Yeah.
Larned Road.
or you could cut the road and slope it a little bit to create some of the drainage you're talking about if it's level. I mean, it's a dirt road, so it could be sloped a little bit.
I think it's already been cut.
Right.
A little bit, well, he just said it was level, not drained because it was level.
yeah, I mean the potholes and stuff that kind of exist along the road as it,
Yeah.
gets plowed. And
Keep in mind, it's also outside of their jurisdiction. That's the city's
It's a
problem.
city road,
Right,
yeah.
well, I mean, it's something you could work with the city on if you want to create
I
a
think
safer
that
parking and
Oak Knoll would be
access.
happy to work with the city, but again, that's something that the city would have to be involved in.
May I? Can you
Yes,
just
but let's try and get
We'll make it short.
public questions.
explain to us, again, why there's an above-ground storage system in the southwest corner? Could that not have been done like you did between, I don't know the names. With a pervious,
Yeah. Yeah, so pervious pavement is pavement, so
Right.
it counts as additional impervious area. And, a bioretention basin, essentially it's gonna look like a, depression with plants in it. So the intent is essentially match the existing, features that are in that portion of the site, since it's generally wooded and landscaped now. We wanna kind of keep that same theme. It adds additional screening for that proposed development, which you'll hear from our landscape architect. And essentially with the new stormwater regulations that came back, several years back, there's essentially subsurface detention is a thing of the past. The only way you can do subsurface that's essentially within a open space or grass area is if you have permeability capabilities in this site. Since we investigate that, we don't have the ability to get the water back into the ground since it's.
And that won't be like a swamp?
No,
bugs and
that's
all
why
that.
we have drains underneath it
Okay.
for that reason. Since it's not permeating back into the ground, we're able to capture it and then, underneath and.
And the landscape architect can show you what those plantings are gonna look like.
Okay, let's open it up to public questions only for this portion of the testimony. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Morano, 80 Prospect Street. I'm directly across the street from the proposed parking lot. My question is, did you take into consideration the 6 curb cuts I have on my property that faces Blackburn Road, right across the street from your proposed curb cut for your exit for your parking lot?
So, the curb cut that we have proposed on Blackburn?
Right, I'm directly across the street. I have 6 curb cuts across. I have a circular driveway and a back driveway that goes to my back garage. And the curb cut is squarely in the middle of all of those cuts. Did that come into any consideration about coming in and out of the opposing properties, how that would affect them?
Yep, I mean, we certainly take that in consideration, which is why we aligned it with that opposite side of the driveway, because you typically want to have 2 driveways that look at one another, so you don't have 2 turning movements that essentially conflict if they don't see one another when
Right,
you're.
but it's not a driveway now, so there is a driveway on Prospect Street.
that exists with the home. So this is a proposed new,
Correct.
which is gonna create, I think, a lot of conflict in that corner with the Oak Knoll moms driving down the street. My second question to you is, when we did our renovation addition on our home, we put in all the appropriate water retentions that we needed to for the town, and they failed miserably. Our soil did perk to the extent it could to put those in-ground watersheds in, and they never worked properly. Along with a pervious driveway that I have on all of my driveways, it fails miserably. The water runs all the way down Blackburn Road, and it comes down Prospect through my property and my neighbor's property. So I'm concerned that even though you've done the studies, which we did, and hired the appropriate people, it still didn't work properly because the
Questions
soil
only,
is
please.
so difficult.
Do you have a question?
Is there anything more that you could do to make sure that these underground systems do not fail after they're put in?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's why we are proposing essentially an under drain system below it, because we know that the water's not gonna get back into the ground. So we are, as it gets released at a slower rate, it's still getting collected by pipe, so it's not gonna sit in there. And in addition, with the condition of approval, we're required to deed to this property, as part of this property, a operations and maintenance manual, which puts on ownership that they are required to maintain their stormwater management system and make sure that it is functioning properly, and that's a state requirement.
Thank you.
Are we retaining drainage jurisdiction?
We can add that as a condition. All right, please.
Brad Olson, 64 Blackburn. I guess I have a similar question along the 76 Prospect parking lot. Someone mentioned that it was a condition of a prior approval that you can't use the driveway that already exists there. Why didn't you consider that as a change or alternative versus adding, like, what's the problems with considering that as access as opposed to adding another access point on, or exit point on Blackbird Road?
I don't know, it's a good question. It's more so that we knew that was a prior condition, that essentially, you know, this application was required to comply with. So under proposed conditions, we wanted to make sure we were maintaining that condition to comply. We didn't want to add essentially an additional, you know, more traffic through a residential in nature driveway on Prospect, rather keep essentially the existing flow of traffic on Blackburn where the majority of it exists
If
today.
it was a condition of approval to not use that driveway, then why is it in existence? What is it doing there?
It was part of the house. It was part of the house when
So
somebody
it's-
lived there.
It's
So it
not
just,
being accessed?
no.
Would you consider closing that access up?
Good question. I mean, it exists today. It's essentially a driveway that's residential in nature, and we just wanted to continue the residential feel of the neighborhood, which is why we kept it there. It's not used for parking.
It's a circular driveway, correct?
No.
It's not
Mr. Chair?
just a one-way access?
Correct.
Is this something that's more akin to the traffic?
I'm sure the traffic engineer can discuss
Right.
this.
All right. let's
And I think it
clear
would be
that with them.
important for them to know that we may be open to an idea of changing a prior resolution based on this
Yes.
resolution.
Yes.
Should it improve traffic flow and the impact on the community?
Yeah, I agree. Might be a good idea, depending on what the traffic engineer says.
Yep.
I have another set of questions around drainage. Well, I'll make a comment, I'll cut me off, but I lost a car in 2020 just down from Liner because of a flood. So there's already an existing issue where there is too much water flowing off of, I'm not just saying, Oak Knoll's property, but the whole hill there. So there's already a very, very difficult situation for the people who live below Larnard. I experienced it losing a car there. You, I think, failed to answer the question that Jay had about how much additional you're doing over and above, but I think it's important that you answer that question. When I had my variance for steep slope, people made me do excess over what was required in a very material way. So I think you should consider that, or will you consider that to make it a question?
Consider doing more than what we're required?
Yes.
Yes, and we are doing more than what we're required.
No, but you
And you
couldn't
will
even
provide
answer.
the
Will you answer
Yeah.
the question, how much more are you doing than
Yeah,
required?
absolutely.
You're not able to answer it this time.
I could if you give me 10 minutes and I do run some calculations. I got plenty of numbers. You're more than welcome to look at our drainage report and review it yourself.
Or he can answer it at the next hearing.
That's
because-
fine, thank you.
Fine.
Yeah, I think that's better.
The next question I have is, what does above ground mean? Is it visible?
Correct.
From Manor Hill and my backyard?
Above ground meaning it's the stormwater will be held above the ground. It won't be a subsurface detention system. Essentially, the water
Is
will
there-
still be visible when there's water in the system.
Is there any equipment above ground?
In this case, there's a small retaining wall that essentially goes around the basin to help form that depression.
How high is that wall?
At the very highest point, it's about 7 feet, but outside of that, it fades back down to essentially none.
7 feet above the ground?
Correct. In the depression. So the depression will be 7 feet down at the very southern corner of that site.
So it's inside
Correct. Yeah.
of it.
Yes.
Not
But will it,
feet
Not
above
seven
It's not,
feet
it's
of-
not,
yeah,
yeah.
will it stick up above ground?
So the
Yeah.
pond is 7 feet
Oh,
into
the
the ground.
pond's 7 feet deep. Okay.
Yeah.
And when there is, there's no water in there because it'll drain, right? If there's, how do you prevent people from falling in there if they're walking through?
Oh, fence.
Is the fence around just
Correct.
that,
The top of the wall that
just
encompasses
top
the
of the
basin.
wall?
Yeah.
How large is that space?
How, the basin itself,
Yeah.
like the dimensions?
Yeah, yeah. How big will the fence be around that?
Well, the fence will be the required 42 feet, or 42 inches for fall protection. But the basin itself is about 60 feet by 40 feet.
Oh, it's massive.
If you wanted above and beyond, we're providing additional stormwater management.
Yeah, but it's also requiring a variance, correct?
No,
Well, the detention basin does because technically.
For the
it's
buffer,
within
correct.
the
Yes,
buffer
it is requiring a variance.
zone. Correct.
Okay, thank you for
And there will
correcting his
be-
incorrect answer to that
I
question.
think he just didn't understand what you're saying. There will be a variance, and I think that when you see the landscaping that's proposed, and then you might have more questions at that point.
Okay.
So I have a question. Will the landscaping have a drawing of what this basin with the fence around it will look like? Does it? Maybe if it was in there, I missed it.
we have a landscape plan that shows the plantings within that basin. It shows the location of the fence around the
Okay.
basin.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a real quick follow-up, just because I have a
Thank you.
feeling it'll be answered next question. But on the basin, will there be something that will circulate the water so we don't have mosquitoes and disease and that type of thing? or will that-
No, but it's a state requirement that that basin drains within a certain amount of time, 72 hours, but it'll drain quicker than that.
Okay, just keep in mind.
Sorry. I have one last question, and I apologize to the board and to everybody here. You had mentioned multiple times that we continue to discharge to Ashland. Are there any other discharge points that could work? Because I know Linden, Oakland, and certain parts of Prospect are.
Yeah, we looked at that as a result of meeting with the neighbors, and there's no existing stormwater infrastructure within Larned.
Is there any on Prospect or at the bottom of Blackburn?
That's uphill, so we wouldn't be able to essentially get stormwater to that point.
Were you able to bifurcate the site?
What do you mean?
Meaning to tranche the site, take the part that's uphill and discharge it on the Prospect, the part that's on Ashland, discharge it there.
So, point that we're missing is it's very important for stormwater design that you don't take water from one point of the site that's draining to one spot under existing conditions and essentially direct it to another location. That's a state requirement with stormwater management that you can't change the location or patterns of
So
flow.
the plan of this site is entirely Blackburn to Ashland.
It's to match existing drainage patterns. That's where it goes today, and that's where it has to go in the
Okay.
future. We just have to make sure that we're holding it back and releasing it slower to comply with the applicable regulations.
Okay.
And exceed those regulations.
Alan Becker, 92 Prospect. Quick, We're net 16 spots, right?
Net,
When we're all said and done with the dance, we are
21.
net
21.
in that area up there where we're out 3 and 19.
Correct.
So that's net 16,
in
right?
this area, correct.
Thank you very much. Okay. Then we're 42 up to 46 per impervious, right? Site-wide, you said?
Percent, correct.
Percent, correct. What is in our R15 with our famous conditional use? What's
40.
max? 40, so, okay, delta 6, thank you very much. In your expert opinion, to Becky's point, what's the lifespan of the pervious pavement, that it acts pervious? You know,
Again, it's required that it's maintained. So essentially
Well, what's the
if it's-
lifespan-
If
what's
it's
the lifespan?
maintained properly, 10, 15 years.
okay, great, and what's maintained? How do you keep the skin clear so the pores allow?
The
Come
pervious
through.
pavement is essentially a street sweeper, a vacuum truck that drives over
Okay.
the top and sucks any stuff out of it.
Okay, so you have a maintenance plan, street
Correct.
sweeper comes by X number of times, okay. And then I'm looking at the grading plan quick, you've got, 407 from the Blackburn cut down to inlet at 401.6, call it a 90-foot, 96 run, does 5.5% smell right on that grade down?
From where? I'm sorry.
From when you enter on Blackburn heading down to the end of your parking lot, of the new, let's
Of the new
focus
one?
on the new
Yeah, more or
parking lot.
less,
Yeah,
yeah.
does about 5% smell right?
Yeah.
Grade, and does the pervious still work when you have first flush running over that at 5%? A good first flush, the 2-year storm at first flush, as it goes over the pervious, is there enough pores for the skin, to allow it to come down in? Because 5%'s not nothing on a parking lot.
It's a really good question, but there is guidelines for the maximum slope for pervious and
Do you know
pavement.
what is that max slope, to be able to get to, that your storm inlet and what you're proposing there can gather the necessary stormwater?
Yeah, it's 5% is the maximum.
It
which
is,
we comply with, yeah.
imagine that. Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, Gary, 45 Blackburn Road. So in front of, from the entrance on, I'm not sure how far, it's parking at non-school days or non-school hours. Is the curb cut out and take away parking spaces?
So I'll defer to my traffic. My understanding is parking is not permitted on
It is
Blackburn.
permitted.
Okay.
Non-school days,
Yeah.
you can't park between, I think, 8 and 5 on
Gotcha.
school days. So that curb cut out is gonna take away parking spaces?
Yes, it would.
And
If
how many-
parking is indeed permitted there, it
How many would
would.
it be, like 3 or 4, or?
Probably about 3.
So that's another reason, sorry. So how is that to affect the public then? Right? The public's gonna be taking 3 spaces for having, I know the exit for only 19 people that are staggered faculty that can't listen to directions and how to leave the exit.
Well, it's still a net gain for the parking situation.
For the public is a loss for non-school days, non-school
Well,
days.
school days, then there's going to be less parking on the street from people that are
Non-school days. You're taking 3 parking spaces from the street.
on non-school days.
Yeah.
But then you're going to have less people parking because school faculty and students aren't there.
But there's more non-school hours than there are school hours in the day. Correct?
I think I'm following what you're saying, yeah.
So you're
correct.
you're taking away
Yes, but in my
parking from
opinion,
the public
This
our
might
traffic
be more
engineer would.
appropriate for the traffic
Yes.
engineer.
for faculty members that can't
Yeah.
follow directions.
I don't think anybody said that they
You
can't
said-
follow
That's what you
directions.
said.
I think that the flow of the traffic doesn't make sense, and you'd probably lose spaces if you had them come back into the
Around, correct,
regular
yeah.
parking. So you wouldn't be able to put as many parking spaces on site then.
But there's an entrance, they can exit, right? If it's all one, people are coming to work in the morning, leaving at night. So it's you enter and exit that same spot, right? So how is that?
I think that the traffic engineer can go through this, and then if you still have questions, he would be the most appropriate person to talk to, but.
All right, and with that, we'll close public questions for this witness. Hillary, I think we're gonna wrap up
Don't want to hear another witness, okay?
for
No
tonight.
problem.
For tonight.
No problem,
Not unless they're 4 seconds long.
not gonna happen.
Stephanie, when are we carrying this to?
February 3rd, the next hearing.
Okay, great.
had a feeling it would be more than one hearing, so we prepared in advance.
So we need a motion to carry it till when?
February 3rd.
We need a motion for that?
Without
Or is it
notice?
already scheduled?
Yeah, without.
Alright, So moved.
And you're providing the time tag.
Yes.
Right. Can I get a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Stephanie?
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Mr. Steiner? Mr. Steiner?
Yes.
Your vote, okay. Mr. Yuko?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson? Yes. Vice Chair Zahn?
Yes.
Ms. Chifo?
Yes.
Mr. Feskins?
Yes.
Chairman Liggett?
Yes.
The motion carries.
Great. We have a little bit of business before we have to take off.
It's too cold, I'm doing this anyways. Turn the heat off on us. Try to make us move faster.
Stephanie, you want to
Yes.
run through the resolutions?
Yes, so our first resolution is
Can the
479.
public just, sorry, we're still in session.
Thank you. Thanks. So our first resolution is 479 Morris Avenue. That's 479 Morris LLC, Block 507, lots 4 and 5, ZB-23-2189. Our eligible voting members are Mr. Steiner, Chairman Loikitz, Mr. Yuko, Mr. Nelson, Ms. Chifo, and Mr. Feskins. Can someone please move that?
So
Okay, and a second? Second. Okay. Bless you. Mr. Steiner?
Yes.
Chairman Loikitz?
Yes.
Mr. Yuko?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson? Yes. Ms. Chifo?
Yes.
Mr. Feskins?
Yes.
The motion carries. The next one we have is 250 Hobart Avenue. That's Beacon Hill Club, Block 2203, Lot 1, ZB-23-2224. Our eligible voting members are Mr. Steiner, Mr. Nelson, Ms. Chifo, Mr. Feskins, and Mr. Chanchuli. Can we have a motion? Second. Okay. Mr. Steiner,
Yes.
Mr. Nelson, Yes. Ms. Chifo,
Yes.
Mr. Feskins?
Yes.
Mr. Chanchuli?
Yes.
The motion carries. And then the final one we have is 230 Oak Ridge Avenue. That's Thomas and Allison McMillan, Block 5106, Lot 13, ZB-24-2264. The eligible voting members are Mr. Steiner, Chairman Loikitz, Mr. Yuko, Mr. Nelson, Vice Chair Zahn, Mr. Curran, and Mr. Malay. Can we have a motion? So moved.
Second?
Okay. Mr. Steiner,
Yes.
Chairman Loikitz,
Yes.
Mr. Yuko,
Yes.
Mr. Nelson, Yes. Vice Chair Zahn.
Yes.
The motion carries. And then finally, we have the minutes from January 8th, 2025. Sorry, 29 Ridge Road, we're not doing? No, we're saving that for next time. Okay. Sorry. So we have the minutes from January 8th. Everyone here was present for that meeting. Can someone move that?
So moved.
And a second? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.